The daughters were getting ready for the wedding, primping in front of the mirror. Carl sat at the table, watched them from under the nose of captive eyebrows, and in his heart quietly rejoiced that he had saved the children, raised them alone after the premature death of his wife. How much misfortune had been endured. The eldest Lily was short, reserved in her feelings, and as it seemed to her father, smarter than a step will not step until she weighs everything properly. But she's got a head full of books, no use for it. Whatever she does, she keeps a novel with her. Younger May is tall and thin like her father, fidgety. She had time to examine herself and make a remark to her sister. "Why do you need that handkerchief?" "I wrapped the handkerchief nicely to tidy up my hair," Lily replied. "And look at you. You'll go like I don't know who with your hair unbraided." "I will. I like it that way." The willful little sister shook her head. Lily played her lips up and instructively said, "It's only loose girls who go like that, and decent ones should gather their hair as they should." "I don't owe anyone anything." "Dad, tell her," Lily insisted. "What's the big deal?" "Well, I'll tie it up. Now will you calm down?" May replied. Father sighed silently. The force returned from the city to the countryside. The bankruptcy of the company, the death of his wife after the accident seemed a distant, terrible memory. At first in the village had to live with his brother Kostya. Carl worked all winter. He patched up the old house only in the spring he moved with his daughters to his own place. Now in the village it was hard to work on the farm. To live without needing anything, he kept 4 cows, a couple of horses, a pig and chickens. Preoccupied with his thoughts, the father did not notice that the daughters continued the argument. "You're still small, you don't even have a passport," Lily said to her sister Mai. "I'm the little one, we'll see. See who's the bigger of the two of us." Minnie, laughing, stood in front of the mirror next to Lily and was almost a head taller. "Taller than the sky." "Still silly," Lily replied and stepped back. Carl said grudgingly, "Enough of you magpies arguing. Get ready, because without you the wedding will be played." "I'm ready," replied the eldest daughter. "Did you take everything?" "All of it," said Lily, nodding. Her father, a tall, wiry man, got up from the table and slowly dressed, took his bag with the hotels and headed for the door. May once again had time to spin in front of the mirror and was satisfied with her slim but slender figure. She left the house easily. The girl's soul sang and lived with a premonition of something unusual and happy. She wanted that very boy to look at her with delight. "Barry, where are you?" shouted Carl from the porch. The skinny teenager looked out of the barn with a pitchfork in his hands. "I'm right here." "Why?" he asked. "Why did you change your clothes? Are you going to the wedding out of Don?" Lily asked unhappily. "No, I'm not going." "Why not?" May was surprised. "What didn't I see there?" "Go and have fun, and I'll watch the house." "But as you wish." Dad waved his hand and headed out of the yard. "It's growing wild here, isn't it?" Lily remarked. "Because he's an orphan," replied her sister. Father walked briskly down the road, but May walked ahead of her father, overtaking him every now and then. She was so enticed by the wedding of strangers. She didn't know the groom at all. She had seen the bride only once, when she had run off with her friends to invite their family to the wedding. The girl was related to her mom. The wedding party was already singing and dancing to the lilting harmonica and loud tambourine, the accordionist stretching the harmonica wide. The guests were making pretzels merrily. Only elderly people remained at the tables. The young people went outside. Lily and May also stood in a group of girls. They stood out because of the beautiful clothes they had brought from the city. The girls here wore simple, canvas dresses, flowers, and scarves. Their cheeks flamed, their eyes glistened, and everything was spinning. "What have you missed, beauties?" asked the sisters. A tall, swarthy young man grabbed both of them by the hands and dragged them to a group of dancers. Lily angrily fought back, stepping further back against the fence. May recklessly rushed to dance and cast naughty glances at the guy. The music broke off. The girl curtsied like in the movie, but I smiled back. "Oh, I know whose daughter you are, Carl." "So what?" May asked cockily. "Nothing, let's get acquainted. My name's Rocky." "I'm May." The guy squinted slyly and winked at the girl. "And this is your sister?" "Yes, this is Lily, Lily." The girl replied, walking up to her sister. "Hello, Lily," said the guy. "Why aren't you dancing?" "I'm looking around." Right, first you need to orient yourself on the terrain and go on the offensive, said Rocky cheerfully. I'm not going on the offensive, replied Lily, making an indifferent look. And on the grooms, laughed the boy. Why step on them? No one else. God forbid we crush them, May replied with a laugh. Cheerful girls went to the table. What shall we drink? In the house, when the guests were poured a shot, Rocky shouted, bitter. And then everyone started repeating, bitter, bitter, bitter. The young people shyly kissed. The guests were satisfied and drank. The father looked at his daughters appraisingly, as if to estimate who was better and what kind of brides were growing up. He liked the eldest one better, a short girl with pretty features, but she behaved with restraint, even disdain for the others. May was tall and thin, but open, smiling, and trusting. Lily was dressed in a red dress made in the town's fashion. Her younger sister wore a simpler greenish plaid dress. 2 thick blonde pigtails lay across her chest. Rocky couldn't resist touching one and tossing it over her shoulder. In doing so, it was as if he had inadvertently touched her breasts. May flashed a blush and leaned over her plate, pretending to eat. The guy looked at her sharp shoulders, smiled at the girl. Why do you have 2 braids? He asked in a whisper. Why do I like it so much? We have such a custom in our village. Girls before marriage wear 1 braid, since they do not yet have a pair, and women too. It's true. You're not joking? Embarrassed, May asked and hastily tied the shawl on her head. Rocky took a long look at Carl's daughters. By evening, the guests gathered to take the bride to the groom. It so happened that Rocky and May piled together into some wedding cart, where the attendants were closely seated. The horses rushed to the neighboring village of Adelanto. The people belted out a song. May, too, joined in the disorderly chorus. She didn't know where her memory had brought the song from. Maybe when you heard it from your late mother. Rocky was singing in her ear, squinting his black eyes slyly, humming May to keep her from falling out of the cramped cart. The girl had never been happier in her life than she was now. Under the warmth of the man's rapturous gaze, her soul sang. Soon they reached the groom's house. It was only then that May noticed that neither her father nor sister had arrived. But it did not upset her at all. The guests were sharing, eating the loaf, singing and dancing to the tireless harmonica. And May saw no one but Rocky. They realized only when they noticed that the house was empty. The harmonica was quiet. The party was over. I guess it's late. We should go home, said May. Let's go. Rocky nodded his head and without saying goodbye to anyone headed for the door. The girl followed him, entered the dark room, where she bumped into someone in the dark and almost fell. But the guy supported her and led her out into the open air. The cloudy night sky hung over the silent village. Only a few stars peeked out. The black outlines of houses and trees were barely visible in the darkness. May, nearsighted since birth, could see almost nothing, so she held tightly onto her companion's hand. God, I don't even know which way to go. That's a mess, May said. At least I know everything. Aren't you cold? Rocky answered, I'm hot. Then warm me up too. Rocky put his arm around May and tried to kiss her. At first she jerked fearfully, but the guy held her back, and the girl gave herself to a pleasant, not yet known to her feeling of passion, tenderness. When Rocky finally loosened his embrace, quieted for a moment, May, as if wanting to muffle her bashfulness, said mockingly, almost strangled him. I wonder if we'll have our whole lives ahead of us. Ironically, replied the boy. Are you going to strangle me for the rest of my life? With contrived indignation asked the girl. And what else can I do with you? Rocky laughed. Again he embraced the girl and kissed her for a long time until she began to pull out. We'll never get anywhere like this, May said. What's the hurry? It's a long night. The boy took May under his arm and they walked along the quiet village street. It was a pleasant walk. Mai felt the soft and warm palms of his hands. Hearing his breathing beside her, tried to walk with him step by step. Gradually the village ended. They slowed down a little. Where did you live? Washington. Why did you leave here? My father got sick and then he died. Our mother died even earlier. I was 13 when I was left for the master, 3 sisters and all the little ones. It was hard enough. We survived. They walked the road through the field. The piercing night air was blowing through their jackets, but May tried to ignore the cold. Are you cold? Rocky caught on. I need to warm up a little. On the road? I know a place. The guy turned off the road and headed towards some building. Where are you going? The girl asked anxiously. A farmer used to live here. His house was demolished, and the bathhouse is waiting for us. I'm not going there. The girl was stubborn. I'll carry you in my arms. Rocky dashingly picked up the girl and carried her away. She didn't break free, snuggled against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Rocky let May go, opened the door, stepped into the middle of the room. The girl stepped in after him. Beneath my feet rustled the straw that lay there, smelling musty. See how warm it is in here. Let's go to that corner and sit. Do you know all the corners? Rocky's companion asked in surprise. Last year I hid from the rain so many times here. Sat on the straw, which was soft and warm. And there are no mice here. May asked cautiously. You're so tall, it would take a lot of mice to eat you. Rocky took a bottle out of his pocket and handed it to the girl. Have a drink, you're hungry, there's no place to sleep. I don't like your jokes. No problem, as long as you like me, and there will be new jokes for every occasion. Here, have a sip, warm yourself up and be well. What's in here? Arsenic water. Drink it. May, laughing, took a sip, choked, coughed. Like a little child. You don't know how to drink from a bottle. But it's vodka. I don't like vodka. She was indignant. You just haven't gotten the hang of it yet. Learn from me. Rocky sipped a little, handed the bottle to the girl again. Try some more, warm yourself up. I've got some candy to snack on and it'll be great. The boy assured the girl. I'm scared. Why are you so cowardly? She took a sip in her chest for a scorcher, pleasantly and warmly spilled all over her body. Rocky put a candy bar in her mouth and asked her, how's it warming up? Really warm. Where'd you get it? Where I got it is done. Let's finish it. Dishes like cleanliness. May took another drink from the bottle and got dizzy. The girl lay down on the straw. She wanted to calm down to sleep. Rocky took the bottle from her and praised her. Rich man, wench. I got intoxicated with everything. Nothing, it'll be gone by morning. He leaned over the girl and started kissing her. It was pleasant for her to bathe in his tenderness. She felt her whole body flush with bliss, her face burning. Rocky's hands roamed over her body, stroking, caressing, striving to free her from her clothes. May, don't be afraid of me. I won't hurt you. See how good we are now. And it's going to be even better. Don't be afraid of anything. Don't push me away. See how good it is, my sweet girl. Pumped by tender words, stunned by love and vodka, her soul recklessly drowned in passion, as if she had fallen asleep, entrusting herself to Rocky's desires. She woke from the cold and opened her eyes. There was light coming through the cracks in the door. It must have been dawn by now. Next to the polanda, arms spread wide with her face up, she pulled her jacket up to cover her chilled shoulder. It was only then that she realized she was naked. A terrible realization pierced her soul. We had everything. How will I live now? How will I ever get home? What horror! She rose cautiously from the straw. A shiver ran through her body from both cold and excitement. She gathered her clothes and hastily pulled on her underwear, dress, and jacket with her naughty hands. I looked at the guy with hatred. Wanted to run out, but the door would not open. The girl angrily jerked the guy's shoulder. Wake up, you hear? Wake up. He opened his eyes and smiled. May sleep early. Where are you going? What have you done? How am I going to be now? I've forgotten how it was. You asked me to. Asked me what? How could you do that? You said nothing would happen. She asked in confusion. Nothing happened. What am I supposed to do now? She asked in despair. Do nothing. I've been here with more than one of them. Thank God, everyone is alive and well, and now they invite me here themselves. These words were like a slap in the face. She blushed and cried out indignantly. What kind of a rascal are you? The girl cried, covered her face with her palms, and jumped out, kicking the door with her foot in anger and almost kicking it away. She hated, cursed the frivolous guy who had convinced her that nothing bad would happen, but himself. May blamed herself for trusting him, for relying on his decency, for taking pity on his orphan. How to live on? She went out to the road, wiped her tears, and looked around. She recognized the place and went to her home. On the road, she met an unfamiliar girl, greeted her with a snide smile. May seemed to know everything about her. Terror filled her soul. How to live now, how to return home, and how to look into the eyes of her father and sister. When she entered the house, Lily was already preparing breakfast. Dad and Barry weren't in the room. "Where have you been?" her sister asked indignantly. "I was at the wedding." Quietly, May answered. "Me and Dad were there too, but I slept at home. We went to Adelanto to see the groom." "Who's we?" May, realizing she had almost spoken, explained. "All people are guests." "Who invited you?" "I thought it was the right thing to do. People are coming, and so am I." Lily picked up a rag, approached her little sister threateningly, and shouted, "I know where you've been. I know where you've been. You slept over with Rocky. He's got a girl besides you." "I don't know Rocky," said the sister, putting a look of indifference on her face. "But the one that's been hanging around you all the time." "Which one?" "The one with the saggy lip? I forgot his name." Lily looked at her sister in disbelief. "He didn't have a saggy lip. He was a good-looking guy. Only a woman there told me he'd been going to nannies for a long time." "What do I care? He can go wherever he wants." "So where have you been?" "I left the house at night, went the wrong way and got lost. You know I can't see very well, and I can't see very well in the dark. I wandered all night, and when it dawned, I found my way home." Lily shook her head and said mockingly, "What do you think of yourself? Everyone in the village is out in the open, and people will think the same of me if they see you walking around." "I don't care who thinks what," May answered indifferently. "But I do care. Your father is looking for you half the night. Shame on the whole neighborhood. I'll show you how to go out at night." Lily furiously pounced, slapping May painfully with a rag. The younger sister, covering her face with her hand, jumped out the door and ran out of the yard, heading towards the woods. Only there could she hide her grief from the eyes of strangers. A tart lump seized her throat. Tears flowed from her eyes. Crying with despair, she thought that she shouldn't live. Nothing would keep her here. As she dies, no one will cry, "My dear mommy, take me to you, save and protect me. No one loves and pities me. I can't live like this anymore. Where are you? Where can I find you? Mom, call me back. Give me advice on what to do, how to live. Take me to the other world. Take me away." Mai remembered that her mother had once been forced into marriage. She had never been able to overcome herself, to love someone she didn't love. Her dislike for her husband was reflected in her attitude toward her youngest daughter. Back when they lived in the city, May, feeling alienated from the family, sometimes ran away from home. Probably she did it subconsciously to draw attention to herself. Most often she went to the market, where good-natured vendors treated her to pies. Her mother would punish her daughter, most often hitting her with a towel or a rag, as Lily does now. These memories made her feel even more sorry for herself. After crying all her tears, she fell into a heavy sleep of a mentally exhausted person. She awoke at dusk. Her legs and arms were numb with cold and immobility. She looked around and remembered the misfortune that had happened to her and wanted to fall asleep again, never to wake up and remember nothing about last night. A wave of chills swept through her body, and she got up and paced. Wanting to warm herself at least a little from the gaps between the tops of the fir trees, the stars looked up at her, and even from them she sought to hide, for it seemed they were laughing and judging her. She wanted to see no one, only death would bring relief. She imagined how she would lie in a coffin, dressed in a white dress and veil. Gradually the forest parted, his voice faded. Beneath her feet and squelched the marsh, water poured from behind the clay of her boots. May realized that she had walked into the swamp in the dark, realized that she would drown and no one would ever find her. No, she didn't want that kind of death. Her leg went down over her knee. May barely pulled it out, but immediately her other leg had already fallen in. The girl grasped fearfully at the sight of some bush, scrambled up onto a bump. Nothing was visible in the twilight. She broke a branch, began to feel the path in front of her, slowly going back to where there was a solid bank. Indeed, after a few steps she was back on solid ground. Now it didn't matter where she went, as long as she didn't die in the swamp. Suddenly, Mai felt angry. Why? Why do I have to die? Because Lily doesn't love me. Because he took advantage of my gullibility. What if I have a baby? She thought with fear. Then I will definitely kill myself, she decided firmly. She walked down the forest road. The water was still sloshing in her boots, her feet were freezing. She wanted warmth and calmness, to the stove to warm herself. From afar came the singing of the first rooster, must have been a dwelling somewhere nearby, and she went to his voice, as if God himself had sent it. Gradually, it began to lighten. She saw that the road led to Uncle Tony's house. She was glad and went through the vegetable garden to his house. She shook off the water a little. She went into the dark hall, fumbled for the handle with trembling hands, and stepped into the room. Aunt Betty was already at the stove. Uncle Barry was sitting by the table. "Hello, may I come into your house?" May said quietly. "Hello, you're here," Uncle Tony said. "Where did you disappear to?" "Dad's been looking all over for you," clapped her hands. "I haven't disappeared." Clenching her teeth to make her shiver, the girl replied. "Have you been kicked out of the house?" With sympathy asked the uncle. "No, I left on my own." Shivering, she replied. Their daughter Leslie woke up and asked in surprise, "Why are you like this?" The guest said nothing. Tears flowed from her eyes from this sincere attention, and sympathy covered her face with her hands. "Why are you like this, May?" Leslie asked sympathetically. "She's all wet. Look at the puddle." "Quickly undress and get on the stove," ordered the landlady. The aunt helped her to take off her wet shoes and skirt, gave her a dry shirt, and helped her to climb on the stove. May trembled like an aspen leaf, fell into the warmth, covered herself, and fell asleep. Leslie climbed on the stove. "I wanted to ask her what happened." "Don't touch her. Let her sleep," Betty told her daughter. "She's very impressionable." Everything in her mother managed. By evening, May had a fever. Her head felt heavy. Her whole body ached and ached. Father and Lily came to see May. She didn't recognize anyone and called for her mother. She must have been very sick. What was wrong with her? Carl asked himself. "She has a cold. Maybe we should take her to the doctor." "Wait, you and your doctor," Tony advised. "Those doctors only want to take money from us. I'll go get old Kathy to give her a whisper," Betty suggested. Go, it'll be safer." Tony supported his wife. Lily leaned over her sister, stroked her hot head, called to her. May is mine. Do you recognize me? It's me, Lily." The girl opened her eyes, looked at her sister with a hazy look and whispered, Mommy, I'm sorry, and I'll never be sorry again. I'm sorry, Mom." Lily looked at her sister's exhausted face that had grown up in one 24-hour period and blamed herself for meeting her so harshly. She should have questioned her affectionately. She would probably have told everything, for she had no friend but her elder sister. May had a hard temper. She could be affectionately meek, or she could suddenly snap and become a bully. Lily touched her sister's hot forehead again and called pleadingly, "May, can you hear me?" Her sister looked at the other one inarticulately, smiled weakly, and whispered, Mommy, stay with me. Don't leave me, it's so hard. It's me, Lily." "Mommy, Lily is angry. She doesn't like me. She swears and fights. Nobody loves me." "What are you talking about, silly? How can I hit you? Are you bigger and healthier than me?" The girl moaned and begged for a drink. There was a stomp on the porch. Betty entered the house with her little frisky and talkative grandmother, who said a loud hello from the threshold. "But eating to good people. Why are you all so vague?" "Bless you, Auntie. Come in. Maybe you can give some advice," said the father. "My daughter is sick. Let's see what you have here." Everything in the house was in motion with the arrival of the witch doctor. Mary bent over the patient, put her palm on her forehead, then pressed her ear to her chest, listened to her breathing. Then she performed some manipulations and began to perch May prayerfully. The girl subsided, no longer moaned, and even breathing seemed to become easier. When Mary had finished the right and left, Carl rose prudently, said, "If it's not too much trouble, let her stay with you, where I'll take her when she's sick." "What are you talking about? We are our own one family. Don't worry, we won't let May get hurt." Lily looked sympathetically at her younger sister and followed her father to the door with a heavy sense of guilt. Could she have thought that that morning's quarrel would end in such a disaster? Little had they quarreled before, but there had never been a time when her sister had left home. May had been seriously ill for a month. Sometimes the girl fainted. Mary came 3 times. Finally, her condition improved. In the morning, May suddenly felt relieved, wanted to go out, threw her jacket on her shoulders. "Where are you going?" Leslie shouted after her. "Nowhere, I'll be right back." May squinted her eyes from the bright sun, went out, turned to the pond, sat on the bank. The pain in her soul did not subside. Now I'm going to leave in this clear water I belong. May threw off her jacket, stepped into the pond, stepped some more to throw herself into this cold and put out the fire that was burning her soul. The waves ran away from her in circles. She woke up in Uncle Tony's hut and realized with bitterness that she had been pulled from the other side of the world again. A few days later, May felt healthy. Leslie ran out of the house. May concentrated on her thoughts out of earshot, what mother and daughter were talking about. What had she decided? Where should she go? Sighed the aunt. Where is she going? May asked in surprise. Hadn't you heard? She just said she wanted to go to California. I'm sorry, I was thinking. The aunt looked sympathetically at the girl and shook her head. What's the matter with you? It's as if you're lost, you can't come to your senses. Already came. Please tell me why she goes there. They're signing her up for a job there. And I want her to sign me up too. May asked. You're just a little girl. I know how to do everything. A cheerful Leslie ran into the house and announced that my father had authorized it. Her mother wrinkled her nose in displeasure. He's always catering to your whims. How will you be alone among strangers? She won't be alone. I'll go with her, May said firmly. They won't take you. You've got to be at least 16, Lay, objected Leslie. I'm taller than you. Who knows how old I am? If I'm 16, I'll say I am. You're a risky one. Leslie laughed. All right, let's get some breakfast and get going. I'll have more fun, right, Mom? Betty nodded silently. She started to light the stove, and May thought happily of the fact that she would leave home and not have to see Rocky. After breakfast, the girls went to ask to go to work. What are you going to do, May? Leslie asked sympathetically. I don't know, something heavy on my soul. And my mother taught me so. As shroud sadness, give it to the stone and throw away the water. Your blackness will float away with the water. And I will do so, rejoiced the girl. She picked up the stone that lay on the shore. She imagined that this was how Rocky had changed and all the evil that had fallen on her after meeting him, and threw it into the pond. The stone tumbled heavily and circles ran in the water. May thought she actually felt better. The secretary, who had come from the farm to recruit workers, sat at a wide table in the village hall, papers piled on it. He was not yet an old man, swarthy, dressed in a gray suit and white shirt with a black tie. He looked at the girls and asked, What do you girls know how to do? All kinds of chores, answered Leslie. And they will have to work hard, warned the man. We're not afraid of work. Are you 16 years old? Yes, May persuaded me. Do your parents mind? No, they don't mind, Leslie replied confidently. In that case, I need to write down all the information about you. What's your name? How old are you? The name of the village? The secretary wrote down the information, said that tomorrow morning they should be at the train station. There will be 10 other young people from the surrounding area coming there to go to work on the farm. May was horrified to think that Rocky would be there too, but she reassured herself that he probably wouldn't leave the farm for some phantom wages. The next day, the girls were brought to the station by Uncle Tony. The boys and girls stood on the platform. A secretary in a black cloak was near them. Here we are, May said excitedly. Uncle Tony looked at the young group and said to the girls, If it gets bad there, come back at once and behave well, so that I won't have to blush for you later. Okay, Daddy, don't worry. The girls approached the young people. The secretary marked them on the list and everyone stayed to wait for the train. The sun shone bright and warm in the east over the rails. They burned, reflecting the bright rays, and somewhere far away converged into one point. The train left in front of the brick station. It picked up boys and girls who, though they lived in the villages on either side of the railroad, most of them were going so far from home for the first time. The carriage moved and familiar scenery floated past. May was silent. She didn't want to talk about happiness or grief. She was running away from her recent past, which she wanted to forget forever. The white farmhouse rose at the end of the long alley, a 2-story building with small balconies on the second floor. To the left of it were the outbuildings. That's where the secretary took the young people. In a small but beautiful building, they were greeted by the housekeeper, a thin old woman with a gray head. She took the list and began to read the names. When it was May's turn, the housekeeper even took off her glasses and said in surprise, She's just a child, as thin as a straw. As long as she loves her work, and she will grow old in time. The secretary replied, "You will have to work all day. We will pay well and feed also well. Who will not be lazy, will not regret that he came here. Now I will show you where you will live, where you will eat, and tomorrow morning you will go to work." The young people were accommodated in a small one-story building. 7 girls were already living in the room reserved for girls. There were bunk beds, a few stools, and a table. Mai chose her bed upstairs, even climbing in and lying down for a moment on her new bed. The blanket and coverlet were, the old, clean. Then they were taken to supper. They were given a plate of thick, tasty soup, potatoes fried with small pieces of meat and morsels. Everyone was satisfied with dinner. "Girls, what village are you from?" a blind boy asked Lily. "Have you ever heard of Texas?" "I haven't, but now I'll know. I'm from Vegas." "We got a lot of pretty girls. Why don't you come down and see me?" Leslie suggested it. "I'll pick one for you." "Oh well, don't poke your nose in other people's sausages." Leslie laughed. "You earn money first. You don't want to be a matchmaker with an empty bag. Do you know how much money we have, girls?" cheerfully said the other one, trying to hug May. The girl bounced like scalded and looked angrily at the insolent man. "Why are you so wild?" he asked in surprise. "Why are you jumping on me like a bull? Who would have thought that in the villages such angry girls live?" the boy said. May didn't answer anything. A new life was beginning, and she did not want anyone to spoil it. No, she would not let anyone into her destiny now. In the morning, the boys took the manure out to the field and the girls spread it. The work was not very hard, but for 12 hours they threw so much that they returned from the field in silence. After work, we had enough strength only to change clothes, wash up, have dinner, and go to bed. And it was not frightening. Let there be a sea of work, just not to think about anything, not to remember anything. On Sunday, in a clearing among the linden trees, the young people organized a dance. Leslie started to dance, and May went to the park and only now noticed the first white spring flowers under her feet. The girl thought sadly that soon it would be warm, everything would bloom, but her soul would never be the same carefree joy. "Why is the young lady bored?" There was a voice behind her. May turned around and saw a short, skinny guy with a curly red head. "I'm not bored, just looking around the park. I work here as an assistant gardener and I know every plant." The guy started pointing and naming trees and shrubs. "Don't worry, sir, I won't remember anyway." "And what is the young lady's name?" shyly asked the guy. "May," replied the girl. "And I'm Johnny. Well, we've met. Nice to meet you. Come to my garden more often. In summer, there will be a lot of flowers, apples, pears, berries." "Thank you, but you'll have to live to see summer. Goodbye." Leslie received a letter from her father and read it to May. He wrote in a manly way, summarizing the main news. A lot of boys had been taken into the army. Her uncle listed them all, including Rocky. May thought angrily that he should stay in the army. A burden fell from her soul, for the culprit of her sin and shame was now somewhere far away. On Sundays, she began to go to parties, having fun, jumping and singing. People paid attention to her and asked her to dance. Some even tried to flirt, but May now kept her suitors at a distance. She treated Johnny as a friend because she didn't feel that brutal male aggression on his part, which came from other guys. 2 months later, she received a letter from home. Lily wrote that she had been working as a babysitter all summer, but didn't like the landlady, so she left the job. Father alone can hardly manage the household, hurt his back, lay down for a week. Now he is up and walking around the yard, but he is not a good worker. The elder sister addressed the younger sister as if nothing had happened and supposedly offered a reconciliation. And May accepted it, for she had no other kin but her father and Lily. The leisurely life on the farm was to May's liking. She got used to work, and the evenings walked with Leslie in the garden. "Look, your Johnny's coming. He ain't mine. What do I need him for?" "You'll be a city lady if you stay." "I won't stay. I don't like it here." Johnny said hello from afar, carrying a basket of apples so ripe they looked transparent. "My treat, please," said the boy, placing the basket on the bench. "How delicious!" exclaimed Leslie, biting into the juicy pulp. "You will not be scolded for apples?" May asked. "They're buggers. I collect them and give them to the farmyard. Are you going to the dance tonight?" "I'll come. It'll be fall soon and then winter," May said. "How long were you hired for?" Johnny asked. 2 years, May said. That's good, you'll make money. Help yourself, May, Johnny offered. The girl took an apple. It's delicious. You shine and warm me like the sun. Johnny blushed at this praise and lowered his eyes, hiding his embarrassment. Well, I'm going to go. I have things to do, said Leslie with a sly wink at May. Have some more apples, suggested Johnny. She took a few apples in her hands and left. The yard was empty. I'll go too. May caught up and ran away. Her soul was burdened with its own anxieties, through which Johnny could not reach her soul. 1 year passed, and the second year drew to a close. The workers thought and talked more and more about home. May too wanted to go home already. Lily wrote detailed letters, talking about her father. One warm fall evening, the foreman assigned some boys to drive a wagon load of apples to the factory in the nearest town. He looked around at the group of girls and pointed his finger at May. You're going too? We leave tomorrow at 600 hours. May was pleased that it was she and not someone else who would go to the city, and fell asleep in anticipation of an interesting trip. In the morning, 6 boys sat down on the wagon. Then the clerk drove up in a car and invited May to join him. They passed several gray villages. The town was not far away, a leisurely 2-hour drive. After standing in line for a while, they handed over the harvest. Brigadier clumsily climbed into the car, winked cheerfully at May and said, "You've done a good job. I have to pay you." He took out some money and handed it to the girl. She was too shy to count it, but realized that the sum was impressive. "Thank you," she replied. They drove off, but soon stopped near several stores. "I'll go buy something," said the foreman. "Can I go to this store too?" May pointed to a window where women's clothes were displayed. "Just come in for a while." Nye entered the store. "What does the lady want?" "I'd like a jacket and skirt and a blouse." "You can try them on here." May hurriedly changed and looked at herself in the mirror with delight. The gray color suited her eyes, and the collar of the blouse was refreshing, making her face look expressive. After changing clothes, May went out to the car. "Excuse me, please, what took you so long?" "Wow, I don't recognize you." The foreman smiled contentedly. "Thank you for everything," May replied, embarrassed. The man turned out to a field road as soon as he left the town. "Where are we going?" The girl was worried. "I have business here," the driver muttered to himself. Behind the field stretched a small forest, behind which opened a beautiful lake. The foreman stopped the car, spread a blanket, and put ham, bread, and candy on it. He put down a bottle of wine. He even got 2 shot glasses from somewhere. "Sit down, beautiful girl, let's have lunch," the foreman invited the girl. "By the way, what's your name?" "May." "That's fine. Me from the forge." The man opened the bottle, filled the glasses, and made a toast. "May we always have such a good ride." May drank. The wine, it was flavorful sweet. "Drink up, don't be shy." It was easy to sing, and I ate with gusto. Whoever works well should eat well. It's not a work day, it's a holiday. May laughed. "It's true. The holiday should be forged with your own hands. You're so good. Let me give you a kiss." The foreman kissed May on the cheek. "You're so sweet, like candy." "You'll think of something." May laughed. The wine made her laugh. "Now you kiss me." The man kissed her cheek. May didn't notice she was sober and dizzy. She lay down on the fallen leaves, breathed in the damp smell of the earth. "Rest, rest, rest, and I'm here for you." The man lay down next to her and began to kiss her. She had no strength even to move her hand. "Enough of you. You got me so drunk that I'm like a steak. Even my tongue doesn't obey." The girl mumbled exhaustedly. May old age wants a lot, but can't do much." The brigadier crawled away from the girl and leaned back against a tree, breathing heavily. "That's the trouble. I thought I would try again. Maybe with a young one it would work out. Not to drink wine, not to love young ladies, it's all gone." He helped Nye into the car. As they drove along, the hops wore off. Already at dusk, she came back cheerful in a new outfit, which caused envy. The girls began to wink at each other and smile wryly. "What is it that you have bewitched him?" mockingly asked the neighbor. "And who could he choose? Maybe an illiterate." Angrily answered May and went to her bed, undressed and went to bed. "Tell me what you saw in the city," Leslie asked. "I didn't see anything," May answered, not wanting to share her impressions. What did you buy clothes with? Earned and bought. It's not hard to guess your wages. I guess when I have nothing to do. May didn't realize what an adventure she'd had, but she felt no sin. The foreman had kissed her a few times in a fatherly way, so what of it? He was a nice man and treated her well. Maybe for the first time she fell asleep quickly and easily, as if the guilt she carried in her soul had receded from her. Youth desired a fun and liberated life. Now May had no doubt that she was sure to meet her happiness one day. The second year flew by. On her return, May was habitually drawn into an endless succession. Labor in the field and hayside, in the house and in the yard. In 2 years she had grown into a slender 16-year-old girl. She stood out in a group of girls. Father and Lily were happy with her wages. Little by little, life was rebuilding. Brother Barry went to work for the railroad in the fall. He lived in an apartment in Adelanto. He came home once or twice a month. Lily and May did the housework. Carl felt at peace for the first time. After Christmas, the sisters went out for a party. Music that night was played in the house of a perky girl, the kind they say young, yes early. There was a crowd of smokers outside the house. They invited the girls to come in. They didn't start without you. It was certainly a joke. Already in the yard, they could hear the harmonica playing. Lily was the first to enter the house, and then she crossed the threshold and was stunned to see Rocky standing near the stove in his army uniform. May lowered her eyes so as not to meet his gaze. The young people started polka dancing. Rocky walked up to Lily and May and said hello. How long it's been since I've seen you. How beautiful you've become. He led Lily to the coat rack, as if to help her undress. May stood there not knowing what to do. Should she run away or stay? No, better to pretend she cared about Rocky. There was no body. She saw Rocky dancing with Lily, hiding her excitement, threw off her jacket, and immediately some guy took her under his arm and led her into a circle. They twirled around. May noticed that Rocky kept glancing in her direction. Look at that. Look at your eyes popping out. Angry, May thought. I wish you hadn't come back. How am I supposed to live now? After a while, May asked Lily, let's go home, it's getting late. She agreed. She didn't really like dancing. The girls got dressed, went outside, headed towards home. Soon they heard footsteps behind them. Someone was catching up with them. The two of them were not afraid, so they did not look back. Who could hurt them? Girls, why did you go out so early? The music's in full swing. It was Rocky's voice. May flinched. He caught up with them, walked between them, taking them under his arms. The touch of his hand, a quivering wave rolled over a body that remembered his tenderness and strength. We have to do everything ourselves, there's no time. Lily answered, I don't have a mom either. Rocky noted, you, Brittany, had a mother who managed for a man and a woman while you were in the army. What are you going to do when she gets married? Lily laughed. I won't let her marry, and in the worst case, I'll marry her myself. Marriage is the worst case scenario for you? Lily asked. Think about it. How can I get married before I've married off 3 of my sisters? Lily and Rocky were chatting merrily, and May was silent, wondering how she could get home without hearing or seeing him. Ma'am, why are you silent as if you had water in your mouth? Tell me at least, how do you live? Asked the guy. Even asked how I live? Cheeky. Angrily, she thought, but answered coldly and mockingly. The best. Our May has been on the job for 2 years, Lily boasted. Rocky whistled in surprise and asked, where can you work at that age? Yes, on a farm alone. Lily answered again. I wish I'd known. I was in the army. I would have found it. May was silent again, realizing that it was an empty speech. He hadn't written a letter in 2 years. She thought, didn't ask how I was, if I was alive and well, and suddenly he had such a need to see me. Get out of here. Maybe you're getting married? She's only 16. She's a green kid. What kind of marriage? Let her grow up a little. She gave herself 2 years when she drove to work. Lily replied, only 16. Rocky was genuinely surprised. I thought she was older. The snow crunched underfoot, and the sky sparkled festively with stars. Lily was chatting merrily, and May felt oppressively insecure, walking with her head down. At a bend, she released her hand, lagged a little behind, and stepped forward. Feeling like she was free from his grasp, she breathed more freely. Heading straight for the house, Lily stuck with Rocky. When her older sister entered the house, May was already lying on the bed, pretending to sleep. She experienced insomnia that night, still couldn't decide how she should live her life. Wondered at Rocky's cunning. See how he turned himself, pretending to woo Lily, spinning like a frying pan. Let's see what happens next. Don't let him think I'm going to chase after him. He won't. With this firm conviction, the girl fell asleep sometime in the morning. She dreamed that she saw Rocky again. He catches up with her and kisses her for a long, long time. She woke up and thought bitterly that there was no escape from him in her sleep. That night, Rocky came back to the party. "Where have I been?" asked the hostess girl. Rocky, unhappily and angrily, flashed her eyes. "I talked to the guys on the street about the service. I went outside, you were not there. Standing cold, so we walked a little. It calmed down. Let's go dancing." "Let's go," answered the guy. They twirled. The girl smiled happily. Rocky smiled too and looked away. He didn't like to look into women's eyes because they expected something from him, and he didn't want to promise anything to anyone. The will was more precious. Rocky didn't go to the second dance. His girlfriend was dancing with someone else. After the dance, she came back to him. "Well, what took your soul?" He smiled. "And what, are you jealous, or what?" she asked, lowering the resentment on her face. "To be jealous, you have to love. Why are you so cruel?" "Unfair. I don't throw myself at girls. I've been around Lily and her sister recently." "Go jump with that black guy. He's missing you." "You're silly. Come on, while your mother's asleep, I'm waiting for you." Hotly, Nanny whispered. She cast a glance that called and promised pleasure. That glance of awe and tension pierced Rocky's body. Rocky had been left a round orphan as a teenager. With his older sister, he ran the household and raised his younger sisters. Working the land, it is difficult to get out of poverty. So from time to time he found work to earn money, paid taxes, and bought necessary household utensils. Thus, despite his youth and orphanhood, Rocky was considered a smart and strong master in the village. But he wanted more out of life. He regretted not having a good education. He only finished elementary school. However, Rocky continued to be interested in science. First, he reread all 425 books that were in the school library. Secondly, he bought a Bible from the local bishop and began to study it slowly every free minute. The life of the village people unfolded before him. On Sunday evening, Rocky left for Adelanto, where he intended to meet a friend. The frost was holding out, which invigorated and energized the lad. Rocky entered the house. The host rose from the table and went to meet his guest. "Good of you to come." "How could I not have come?" "Sit down and rest from the road." "Are you hungry?" "No, thank you." "Why didn't you bring some of the other trustworthy guys with you?" Buddy asked. "Some other time I will, but in the meantime, why don't you introduce me to your girls? Why do you want to get married?" "I'm just looking. City girls, slutty, country girls, modest, shy. That's why it's hard to see them behind their scarves and aprons." "Maybe you're right, but you want to take one that you can't look at for the rest of your life. It doesn't work that way. Everyone gets older, and unfortunately, so do the ones you love." "All right, let's go to the party." Buddy slung his jacket over his shoulder, and they walked out into the frosty evening. They arrived at the house where the next dance was scheduled. They entered the house and the young people crowded around the door. Girls were dancing in pairs in the middle. The guys were in no hurry to join in, smoking cigarettes, laughing. "Pick who?" Buddy suggested. "I've got my eyes wide open," Rocky replied. "Take the one closest to you." Buddy asked for a tall, stately girl. Rocky chose a slim girl with a long braid below her waist. Big blue eyes looked at the unfamiliar guy in surprise. Small lips stretched in an awkward smile. It was a girl, a teenager, who had come to the sit-in for the first time. Rocky regretted making such an unfortunate choice, but he invited her in for a few dances and then suggested it. "Come on, baby girl, can I walk you home?" "No, I'll go with my brother." The girl waved her hand. A tall guy approached Rocky menacingly, asking unhappily, "Why do you stick to her, or you don't have enough girls here?" "There's plenty of girls. She's the best. I know you. Go back to where you came from." "What's the matter?" asked Buddy in a hurry to stop the fight. "Nothing. Everything's fine." Rocky turned and walked away. Afterward, the young people crowded around Nanny's hut. Rocky shook hands with a few of the boys. "You're going to the hat show," said one neighbor. "You're wrong about the girls," Rocky replied. "Your nanny's busy tonight. Bobby's out with her all night. She's as much mine as she is yours, and who goes around, comes around. I thought you guys were serious? Don't think too much. It can give you a headache. I'm going inside. I'm freezing. The boy went into the house where the harmonica was playing frantically, the heels of boots and soft blades stomped. Couples were dancing. Nanny was sitting with the boy, whispering something in his ear. However, as soon as she saw Rocky, she walked toward him. Where have you been all night? Where I wasn't. Why are you like this? Have I done something to offend you? No, on the contrary, I'm very glad you didn't miss me, and you were making out with the first guy you saw. Silly, what's Bobby to me? I'm making fun of him. He doesn't understand anything, like a little child. She smiled disdainfully, fixing a dark strand of hair, stood on tiptoe, whispered hotly in his ear. Let's go to the room, I missed you so much. Yeah, I've seen you miss me. Rocky went out, followed by Nanny, and as soon as the door closed, the girl threw herself into Rocky's arms, greedily kissing his face, eyes, and lips. He picked her up, carried her away, and laid her on the bed. A hand slid down her leg, obscuring her skirt. Wait for what I'm going to say, Nanny asked. What should I say? Whispered the guy with passion falling to her lips. Nanny freed herself from the embrace and said insistently, Listen, please. Okay, I'm listening. We're going to have a baby. What baby? Ours. Rocky leaned back and laughed. What are you doing? The girl asked warily. You're so sneaky. Not even a month after he returned from the army, and you want to impose on me a child, which was someone on a walk. It's your child. I've always loved you and waited for you from the army. You are my first. Who's the first and who's the last? You're my only one. You know I can't get married. My farm is abandoned. I've been without a man's hands for 2 years. You're giving up on me and your child. Nanny interrupted him indignantly. Only you, there is no child yet. Don't mess with my head. I'm not a stupid boy. I don't want you like that, slut. Is that your last word? Last word. You got a pot belly before the army, Gwyneth, and then you refused. She had to go and marry a widower, 3 estranged children. Nanny sobbed. She wrote me a letter to the army and asked if she should wait for me. I said not to wait. How could she write to you about a child? I don't know about Gwyneth, but I don't believe you. It can't be. Nanny got up and said angrily, I'll never forgive you for this, and you'll regret it. You will cry and beg, but it will be too late. The girl slammed the door hard. Rocky lay on the hay for a while, chewing dry grass and thinking about how cunning girls are now once in a child. Such blatant lies angered him. He decided he wouldn't look at Nanny now. There were enough girls, at least Lily and May. Choose either the older, small, clever, master, or the younger, cheerful and sweet. And how many more beauties are growing up? Like the one I saw at the party today. The boys and girls went home. A woman with a horse is a mare with a horse. Rocky thought about Nanny. Where were you when Bobby took your Nanny to the hayloft? I was just getting her ready to go to him. Rocky laughed lightheartedly. How's that? We've had enough girls for a lifetime. There's plenty of young beauties growing up. Good night. Rocky said good night and went back to his yard. Spring was coming hard. The snow had melted noticeably during the day. The wind was blowing warm, and March was approaching. The first month of spring, when the master had to inspect the utensils to be ready for sewing. During the 2 sunny weeks of March, the high snowdrifts had melted. The souls of the people were secretly stirring in anticipation of prosperity, happiness, and wonder. Sisters Lily and May felt the same way. They did not express their heartfelt excitement to each other and behaved with restraint. In their spare time they read, embroidered, or sewed dresses. The older sister sewed, and the younger May helped. She spent lonely evenings with the family and never went out. Lily, on the other hand, was thinking about Rocky, remembering the good times she had had with him the last time. She thought a lot about the new meeting. What would she say? What would she ask him? It was like she was talking to him. Rocky did show up one evening. Lily hid the joyful fire in her eyes and bent over her sewing, and May started right away to do the chores. She didn't have the courage to look the boy openly in the eye. How to pretend that nothing had happened almost 3 years ago? It had happened. It couldn't be undone. And at the same time, she felt steadily drawn to this guy, as if there was no one else around. How are you girls doing? Asked the guest. Nothing, thank God. Where are you coming from and where are you going? Answered Lily. Coming from home and straight to you. I haven't seen you for a long time and I missed you, he said with a smile, looking into Lily's eyes, because May came out at the same minute. I wondered if you were sick, not showing your face around the house. We're fine, cheerfully, Lily answered. And what are you doing? I'm selling Mai's dress, and I've already made mine. You did? How I would like to see you with a new dress, although I like you in this everyday clothes very much, said the guest jokingly and with a smile. Lily blushed. That guy who she had liked since their first meeting 3 years ago finally noticed and appreciated her, even told her so. Rocky looked at Lily's russet head, her delicate face, and thought she should have been born a young lady. May came in and began to grind potatoes. Steam filled the room. The older sister looked up unhappily and said, May, take the potatoes out into the hay. The sister threw a disgruntled look at her sister, picked up the huge pot and carried it to the door. Wait, I'll help. Rocky picked it up. I don't need any helpers, replied the girl. Let me at least open the door. Open it if you don't have anything to do. How do you talk to a stranger? Lily was indignant. Her sister didn't answer the remark and thought, a stranger is a stranger to you, but to me, I can't figure out whether it's more love or hate in me. May zealously pushed the potatoes, as if by doing so she was killing her best feelings for the guy. No, she won't live her life depressed and disappointed. She would start going to parties, dancing with all the guys, and let him see that she had her own life, and she wasn't going to let anyone spoil it. May went to the barn to feed the pigs. Lily didn't do any chores. She's been nagging her hernia. Every morning she wore a tight, wide belt that pulled her belly in. May had the whole household in her hands, and the sister read books alone, but Mai sewed new dresses and thank you for that. When May returned to the house, Lily and Rocky were talking quietly about something. It was awkward. She didn't know whether to leave or to listen. Let them go outside, and the house belonged to May too. She slowly threw off her old jacket, fixed her hair. Rocky involuntarily admired her slender figure. Something suddenly stirred in Mai's chest. Her heart beat excitedly and rushed to meet something unknown, but already desired, as if she had forgotten how much trouble she had experienced because of Rocky. It was sunny on Easter and the spacious clearing behind the village was especially noisy. Not only young people came, but also elderly people and children. The girls were round dancing and the boys were playing cards. Lily and May stood at the edge of the clearing looking around. Then they sang songs and danced together. After the songs, May suddenly became sad. She looked into the distance and felt that she was going to cry. So as not to give away her mood, Lily said, The feast is a feast, but I have to go to the farm. Father's left at home to do the chores. Father also needs to rest sometime. Stay among the people, and I'll go. We come together. We go home together. Rocky had been feeling both happy and anxious lately. His name had gotten on the list of candidates for deputy. On Sunday, even before dusk, the young people gathered in the street. Guys stood in a separate group, smoking, joking. Girls sat and sang. From afar came the melodious voice of a harmonica. The youth immediately turned their heads in that direction, waiting, praising the harmonist. The youth in pairs rushed to dance. Rocky did not notice when May came to the middle of the group, sang, waved her hand, danced, beating out the rhythm with her feet. Flexible, slender, like a birch tree. He involuntarily admired the girl. Perhaps her gray suit with a white blouse was not too suitable for this folk dance, but it stood out. May was not a beauty, but she had an ineradicable natural fire of life that made her different from the others, a special attraction. And that fire reawakened a long ago feeling in Rocky's mind. A little later he approached the girl, put his arm around her waist, whispered in her ear, "We need to talk." May turned her face toward him in surprise, but obediently went with him. When they got so far away that the music was barely audible, May asked, "Where are you taking me?" "I don't know, I'm just going anywhere. I want to tell you something else, that I missed you," said Rocky, put his arms around the girl and started kissing her passionately. She didn't pull out, she snuggled up to him, forgetting about past hurts and sorrows, surrendering to the powerful feelings of his strong hands. They kissed for a long time and could not quench the thirst that had accumulated during the long separation. "Shall we sit down?" he suggested, spreading his jacket on the grass. "But not for long, because they'll be looking for me." "They'll look for me and won't find me. We're well hidden." Rocky laughed. They sat down. May was back in the desired embrace, from which she had neither the strength nor the desire to break free. Rocky loved her. She was willing to make any sacrifice for that love, but she wasn't thinking about anything right now. She just enjoyed this night and wanted it to last forever. Lily tried on Leslie's wedding gown, admiring the beautiful pose. Her cousin, proud of her work, the dress made of white thin batiste with a lace collar looked very beautifully delicate. "You will be the most beautiful at the wedding," said the seamstress contentedly. "Why shouldn't I be the prettiest? I'm not Nani, who first got a potbelly and then got married." "Really?" surprised Lily. "The belly is already huge. Whose work is that?" "They said Rocky." "That can't be right. Gossiping just to smear a good man." "People say Nani got pregnant, went to Rocky and told him everything. He wouldn't admit his kid. So she went to Bobby real quick. It's slutty girls like that who set themselves up to get a guy pregnant and then look for the guilty party," said Lily. May watched her sisters in silence and thought painfully about her own thoughts. She felt that after the last meeting with Rocky, she was also pregnant, and now she didn't know what to do. When she heard Nani's story, she realized that there was no point in asking Rocky for advice or help. He loves only himself and uses girls when he can. Now she was very sorry that she had allowed herself to be possessed. It had happened out of the blue. For whispered, pleaded the boy, her soul. She longed very much for his tenderness and love. She could not refuse the man she loved. No mother, no other person to give advice. Should he kill himself? He will live, yes, girls, love, and will not cry on the grave. Where can I go? Shame. I'm a poor wretch. Lily will bite me, and my father will drive me out of the house. I'll have no life at home or in the village. Everyone will turn their backs on me. And only because of a child that was conceived because of my great love. It's not fair. It's not fair. If no one wants my child to come into the world, then I shouldn't want it. I should go to a witch doctor, see what she can do. May, what's wrong? Or did you fall asleep? Lily called for her sister. She was staring off in front of her as if she hadn't heard anything. What do you want? Back to reality, May. See if it's level, Leslie said. It's even, May replied indifferently, rising from the bench and left the house. What's the matter with her? Asked Leslie. God knows what's the matter with her. She's been walking around for a month like she's lost her mind. May went into the closet, found the money she'd hidden. She went to the witch doctor. The girl was convinced that only this woman could save her from shame and anger, close people. The sorceress met the girl, smiled friendly, looked into her eyes and frightenedly asked, What's wrong with you, baby? Who hurt you? Self. What do you mean? I understand. It's not going well with my boyfriend. I need to be bewitched. I got pregnant. Save Auntie. Stop it. Stop crying. How long have you been pregnant? No, a little over a month. Auntie gave her a look and asked if it's not a pregnancy but a delay. I don't know, Auntie. Do something and put your hands on yourself. Well, wait, die early. Death knows better who and when to take. Tell me, was that time you felt bad because of him too? May nodded her head silently. Poor orphan. No, you have no mother to teach you wisdom. Listen to me. Never let that fellow near you. They'll bring you nothing but misfortune. Thank you, Monty. I don't think I'll ever look at him again. What am I going to do now? Don't you want to have a baby? Everything will change, but the baby will stay. I'm afraid my sister, my father, people I can't even think of. Well, don't cry. Look at this grass growing in the swamp. I know, right? Brew it up and drink half a glass 3 times a day for a week. Thank you for that. You don't say thank you. Remember, don't drink it for more than a week. All right, okay, I brought some. The healer stopped her and cut her off. I don't charge for this kind of help. It's a big sin for us. Auntie, if it weren't for you, I'd probably be dead. Go with God. She went out of the house and looked at the sun. It was still high. The girl first headed toward her house, and halfway there, she turned toward the marsh. Soon the Lasleys played a wedding. There were few guests. Barry invited only the closest family. By evening, however, young people came to the music. May helped Aunt Betty. All day long, she was spinning like a squirrel in a wheel, bringing fresh dishes, cleaning up dirty dishes. She was not happy. She drank the potion. For 2 weeks, her stomach and lower back ached terribly. For several days, May did not get up. exhausted from blood loss and pain, but did not complain to her sister or father. Gradually, the pain receded. The girl calmed down and returned to her normal life, but there was no joy in her heart. She was indifferent and doomed to the world. Almost 2 months, she hadn't seen Rocky, not once gave any indication of herself. May realized that he was just using her like a fool and merely moved on. Never again would she even look in his direction. It was true what Aunt Mary said. He bring more the trouble. Lily was worried about Rocky not coming over too. Why doesn't Rocky come to our house? He's your boyfriend. How should I know? May answered brightly. Lily didn't mind. It really seemed to her that Rocky was courting her. Without her lover, the days dragged on colorlessly and sadly. Even here at the wedding, May smiled at the guests, but it was a sad smile. The girl felt unwanted, as at someone else's party. By the way, Betty only got up sometime in the evening, May said. Go to the young people. Stop, they're already all drunk and full. Some of them at the table are even pecking their noses. I'm better off here. What's the matter with you, kid? Nothing, I'm tired. What, tired, youth? Go dance. I think I will. May went outside. Near the house, drunken uncles and aunts tried to dance, but where were they compared to the young people? The girl didn't have time to look around before someone picked up her friend. She looked over and was stunned. It was Rocky. Why are you scared? He laughed. Nothing, angrily, pursed her lips, May. Let's go dancing. I don't want to. What's the matter? It's been so long since we've seen each other. Rocky gleamed his white teeth. He leaned in close to my ear and whispered, You don't know how much I've missed you, do you? May tried to pull her hand out of his, but Rocky held on tight. Let go or I'll call my father. He's standing over there. Angrily, the girl said. The boy let go of her hand disappointedly and shrugged his shoulders. What's gotten into you? May stood on the porch. Rocky, meanwhile, asked Lily to waltz. Let her dance. I've got a lot of sin on me, May thought, and walked away. For a moment she felt as if her strength had deserted her. Like an old grandmother sitting hunched over on a bench outside her house. That's how I live my life as a homeless person, and I don't know which way to go, where trouble awaits me. Excited voices came from far away. May looked in that direction and saw Rocky with Lily. The girl ran into the house. The sun had risen. Rocky and Lily were walking down a narrow path. The girl smiled every now and then. It put the boy at ease. He realized that she liked him, and that was already enough. Serious and sensitive Lily was the opposite, cheerful and restless May. Rocky didn't care what was going on with May, why she was avoiding him. It wasn't like he'd sworn his love to her. He didn't want to be attached to someone with a soul. I hear you've been nominated as a candidate for Parliament? Lily asked. Yes. Does it matter to you? I think it matters to all of us. I totally agree with you. Well, that's great. I can count on success, Rocky said, hugging Lily. But she slipped away. Is that what's important to you right now? She asked. You can't seduce her that easily. I guess you have to swear a loyalty oath first. The boy thought grudgingly. Hiding the frustration in his soul, he replied. The main thing for me now is my homeland. All our things will be returned to us according to our deeds. And you know, I have never met a person who understood me so well. Sometimes in me, when I read the Bible. I thought you were only interested in romance novels. I'm more interested in historical novels, by the way. But I love novels too. It was you who awakened my interest in the Bible. I'm trying to understand you, your impulses. Oh, to tell you the truth, I don't always understand myself. I'm ready to help you, said Lily. And the sly twinkle in her eye. Give it a try, but how do you do it? Rocky was getting involved in the game that the girl offered him. Both of them, however, were tired of serious conversation. When are you going to get married? Lily asked. I don't know. I have to get my sisters married first, and I already have a girlfriend though. You have a whole village of girls. Many are ready to marry you. Anything mutual is given to one for two. Haven't you been in love yet? No, I've had a few flings, but nothing real. I won't tell you any more. I don't want to confess a word, I want to kiss. Rocky sat up and kissed Lily on the lips. She was embarrassed by surprise and said reproachfully, You don't, then why kiss? I can do it without love. Without love? The girl asked in confusion. For sympathy. Do I like you? Lily let herself be kissed again, then turned and ran away. Lily, why are you offended? I didn't think anything bad. The guy started to justify himself. You're a girl, I'm a guy, we're just going out. It's a casual thing. And I don't want to be a normal girl without love. No, let me walk you back to where I picked you up. Suit yourself. What hotness, what fervor. Only hidden under discretion. Thanks for walking me out, said Lily, walking into her yard. Wait, Rocky asked. He detained her for another half an hour, and she could no longer hold back the passion, gave in to the feelings. They kissed and dreamed of being alone. But then the girl tore and went into the house. Goodbye, she answered from the darkness, already opening the door. Would it be impossible to conquer this girl? No, she'll come crawling back, begging to take me. Rocky thought with passion and laughed at himself, saying what kind of life he had come to, that even a girl did not want to spend the night with him. May watched her sister carefully. She could see how bored Lily was in the evenings, sitting outside the house waiting for someone. Waiting and waiting, waiting for no one. May thought, you can't keep Rocky down with talk. You can't tie him down with anything. He doesn't love anyone. May remembered her recent chance encounters with Nani. She was walking along, carrying a big belly in front of her. She said hello, stopped May and asked, does she come to see you, Rocky? What do you care? Don't trust him. Why you care about me? Think about yourself. I'm just trying to be you good, you fool. Salt in the eyes of someone who doesn't wish us well? May said and went on her way. Her sister sat down next to Lily on the stoop and asked, is it an interesting book? Very. Tell me, what does it say? About love. I'll tell you when I finish. Let's go to the dance. I don't like those gatherings. I won't go. I'll go. I'm not 100 years old to sit on the sidelines. Go. Who's keeping you? Lily answered blankly. May went into the house, and a few minutes later came out in a blue chintz dress, which Lily had skillfully sewn for her. Look at your work. Well, out you go and show it off. I'll be sure to tell everyone it was you. May walked out of the gate and seemed to fly rather than walk. The hem of her light dress was developing. All of her was light. That lightness filled the soul. She wanted to run or spin on the field path as she had waltzed with Rocky, and she began to spin. She opened her eyes and saw her lover in front of her. Where did you come from? She was surprised. So many questions at once. Hello, May, answered the guy hunting the girl. I came to see you. She bounced away from his hand as if stung by a viper. Don't touch me. What are you? He looked, uncomprehending and resentful. I hate you. I hate your eyes. Hands understood. Why? Rocky asked with unwritten surprise. Edie is waiting for you there for your Lily? You're jealous of your sister. I was coming to you. You've already gone to me. Stop it. May screamed. Her voice trailed off into a wail, and to hide her tears she ran. Wait, shouted Rocky after her. But the girl didn't hear him. She ran down the path. The spikes were hurting her arms and face. It seemed that she was being overtaken by misfortune, from which it was necessary to run away, to hide. She was panting. She stopped only when she ran out to the neighboring village. The voice of a harmonica was heard. May headed there leisurely, approaching a group of girls. Nearby was a familiar guy, Jerry. He asked her to dance. The whole evening the guy never left May's side. As the time passed midnight, the girl said tiredly, Enough fun. It's time to go home. Dad's going to get mad. I'll walk you home. Jerry offered readily. Come on, if your feet aren't too bad, she answered calmly. Aren't you afraid to walk alone? May suddenly remembered the night when she had wandered through the woods looking for death. Nature had saved her, however. Who am I afraid of? Villains don't live here, and evil spirits don't touch good people. Brave, I'm sometimes afraid to walk alone at night. If you're afraid, it's better not to walk with you. I'm fine with you. I don't want to say goodbye, Jerry confessed. They walked beside the road. Behind them, the harmonica was still playing. Girls and boys were singing ditties. May cried out, Oh, I stepped on a rock. I almost fell. My leg hurts. Should I carry it in my arms? Carry it. At least I'll rest. May laughed. Jerry easily picked up the girl in his arms and carried her. You're strong. She was surprised. So I carry more expensive sacks of potatoes, Jerry grinned. Suddenly sand splashed in the girl's face. "What's that?" she shouted. Jerry let go, looked around. 5 steps away from them stood Rocky. "You're crazy. You gonna throw a rock?" Jerry went at Rocky with his fists clenched. "I will. What do you think? Let's go back and talk." The boys stepped aside and started arguing. May looked at them with disdain, snickered, and walked towards her house, thinking only of the fact that Rocky himself wasn't living and giving her a life. When was not far from her house, her lover caught up with her, grabbed her hand and asked, "Wait, please, I beg you. Tell me, what am I guilty before you? I don't know what is bothering you, what I did wrong, how I offended you. I think I'll check with Lily." She couldn't explain anything either. He was so subdued now, so helpless. May suddenly felt sorry for him. She replied to reassure the boy. "What makes you think I'm offended? You were yelling that you hated me. I wanted to go to a party, and all of a sudden you're here. Well, I guess she's gonna get in my head again. I've got to fight back. That's all. Lying girl. Forgive my stupidity. Let's sit down here. Did you get so tired?" He spread his jacket on the grass and sat down, pulled May by the hand, sat down beside her, put his arm around her shoulders. "Don't touch me." The girl dodged the embrace. "You scared me. I saw you with him and almost went crazy." "What are you so worried about?" "Why what?" "That." The guy bent down, plucked a flower, gave the daisies to May. The sun lit the heart, filled the soul, an inexplicable feeling of love, a desire that could only be quenched by his kisses and embraces. The girl forgot about her recent troubles. There was no woman in the world happier than her. May kept remembering their meetings, filled with tenderness. Her heart sank, and a passionate wave flooded her body. For 2 weeks he had forgotten about her. That was why the girl was bored and suffered so nastily. The harvest brought all the villagers out to the fields. Carl's family also went to work. May was the fastest and quickest at work. Suddenly she felt sick. She felt dizzy and her eyes started to swim. "What's wrong?" Lily was the first to rush to her sister. She brought her water lightly, patted her sister's cheek. May regained consciousness. She opened her eyes. She looked at her family in surprise and asked, "What's wrong?" "Nothing," answered the father. "Get some rest in the shade. I told you the sun bakes your head." Lily rebuked. "Go home and rest, daughter." May drank some water, took a handkerchief out of her bag and tied it up. She looked at the family members who were back at work. "What's wrong with me? Am I pregnant again? Oh my God, what am I supposed to do now? It's going to be Rocky's baby, the only one I love." But then fear struck, a reminder of the shame awaiting the country girl, left alone to go to the swamp to look for grass. So that's why Rocky's out of sight. He feels what he did, and if you tell him what will happen, he won't admit anything, just as he didn't admit Nanny's child. And he'll spread gossip all over the village. "I'm better now, Papa," May said and gathered up her braid. "Take your time. It's a long day. Save your strength." May's cheerfulness was gone from her face. Her hands went slowly. After lunch, Mai felt sick again and began to vomit. The family members thought the girl had poisoned herself. The father insisted that his daughter go home. May did not object. Jerry caught up with her on the way. "Are you mad at me?" "Why will I be mad at you? You're with Rocky. He said you've been with him for a long time." A blush flooded the girl's face. She said indignantly, "He's a gossip. Don't believe him." "I've had enough of girls," Jerry answered indifferently. May could no longer hear him. She turned resolutely toward the swamp. A sharp rush of resentment squeezed the crush out of her soul. Not only was Rocky taking advantage of her, but he was also bragging about his victories. The summer and fall passed restlessly for Rocky. Had to spend a lot of time on meetings as a candidate. He met with young people to old people, walked around, feeling the close victory in the elections, and the support of the villagers was in anticipation of a new life. Rocky rejoiced that he had achieved everything he wanted. With 2 sisters married, he couldn't hold his joy any longer. He wanted to share it. So he went to visit Lily and Nay. Both sisters were home. Lily was happy to see him, welcomed him. "Did you forget to come here?" "I didn't forget, I've just been very busy." He glanced at the silent May, who was knitting something and never looked up. "How have you been?" "No change. My father's gone to his uncle's, and we're at home." "Do you still sew?" "Yes, I make a little money sewing." "What kind of jacket will you make me?" "I will. It will be the most beautiful," Lily promised eagerly. May glared angrily at her sister. She's anointing herself, so be it. I hate him and her with him. What am I doing here? I have to go. May decided. She got up, dropped her knitting and left the house. What's she doing? Rocky asked. Who knows who she is? She's kind of weird. Maybe you two had a fight. She's been quiet lately. One night I heard her sobbing and crying. I started asking her what was wrong. She didn't say anything. She pretended to be asleep. What about you? I was waiting for you. Lily confessed and lowered her eyes shamefully. If it was necessary, you would have come yourself. They'll laugh at you. They'll say they're chasing you. You're a good girl. I'll meet you tonight by the woods. I want you to know that we're together now. Rocky leaned over and kissed Lily on the lips. I don't understand you. Helplessly, Lily said. I don't understand myself. I see a beautiful girl, and one thought I have is to kiss her. I never realized you were so fickle. I'm worse than fickle. I've been fickle forever. I'll meet you tonight. I'm going out. Rocky wrapped his arms around her, started kissing her, feeling a flutter of excited warmth. Picked her up in his arms, carried her rude to the bed. Aren't yours coming back? I don't know. Lily was confused. But we'll hear, he answered. Laying her on the bed and pushing up her skirt. Soon Rocky came out of the house and looked around the yard. May was stacking firewood. Suddenly someone hugged her tightly around the shoulders. She cried out in surprise. She looked back, saw Rocky, and resolutely freed herself from his embrace. Why are you so angry? Asked the guy, lowering the look of resentment on his face. Why are you pouncing like a hungry man on bacon? I'm not your wife. What kind of a fool hugged his wife? Rocky laughed. You just want to take, and then not to hug. I haven't seen you in so long. I've missed you terribly, and you don't even want to look at me. The guy rebuked the girl. Soon there was a vote. Rocky did not become a deputy. A single man didn't inspire confidence. One of the villagers wanted to marry Rocky's older sister. Don't you have anyone else to match? Why not? I'm choosing. I want a girl with a good dowry. You know, you're a good boy, but you're too stingy. I won't marry your sister. She's an old maid. No one would ever look at her. I need her myself, a good mistress. Where will I find someone like her to marry? It's time you married your own. Lately, May had been living in anxiety and vain hopes. Every day she waited for Rocky, but he was attached to Lily, secretly making appointments for her sister and spending pleasant evenings with her. Lily gave up and waited for the guy to matchmake soon. He never came to their house. There was no need for him to go out with the girl who loved him. May realized again that she was pregnant again in her soul. Her love began to be slowly supplanted by hate, cursing herself for her gullibility and inability to say no to the one who was taking advantage of her love. If there is no father, there should be no child. This age-old patriarchal law of the village to transgress, which the girl has no right to cross. Shame will fall on you and your family. With guilt and shame, not everyone is able to survive. Some village girls have killed themselves or died trying to kill their child. Mai also said that she didn't want to live. She would rather die than bear a child and dishonor her family. By herself, the decision came that she would forget Rocky forever. Never even look in his direction. He's a traitor, a reprobate, a troublemaker. No matter how long she was with him, he would always leave her in trouble as well, and the pregnancy, well, it could be gotten rid of. The lust for life was gradually returning to her. The girl went to church after confession. May felt freer and lighter. On the way back, someone took her under the arm and quickly led her forward. She glanced to the side, saw Rocky, and felt sluggish throughout her body. Marry me, her lover suddenly suggested. Her head went spinning. If the guy hadn't held her under his arm, she would have fallen here right in the middle of the road. But he held her so tightly that she could neither fall nor break free. May looked at him again, as if not believing her eyes, and suddenly joy filled her soul. Come to your father for marriage. Everything happened just as she had dreamed. She felt his hand trembling with excitement. That trembling was transmitted to her. So they walked under strangers' gazes, open to the world, and nothing could separate them now. An outsider might have thought that they were walking spouses who loved each other very much. After all, girls and guys are not allowed to walk like that. But Mai didn't care what people thought of her now. She was happy to be seen under the arm of the person she loved. Let him lead wherever he wanted. Only this road would never end. At home, May suggested, "Let's come over to our place, Lily will be glad," said me nonchalantly as if testing him. "How is she?" "She usually sews a lot, reads a lot." "Well, it'll be interesting to talk to her. Let's go to your place." Rocky put his arm around May and kissed her. She broke free and bounced away from him. "What are you so wild about? There were people on the road. No one here. Anybody from our house gonna see?" "All right, I'll wait till tonight." "I'm not sure I'll see you tonight." "What's that?" Lily almost threw herself into a hug when she saw Rocky, but when she saw his calm gaze, she remained standing by the table. "How are you?" "Thank God, everyone is alive and well," replied the master, and as girls' grooms beat all the thresholds. "Fun?" asked the boy, looking at Lily. "There were matchmakers, but my daughters refused to marry," said the father sadly. Lily snatched up the letter and said, "There's an American who's asking me to marry him. I wouldn't want her to have anything to do with that man." "Do you know him?" Lily asked in surprise. "I don't know him, and I don't want to know him." Rocky laughed nervously and threw the letter into the stove, where the flames were jumping merrily. Lily's sleep was uneasily awakened by a sense of resentment, but now she was most interested in where her sister had met him. Why had they come together? Where had May disappeared to that she hadn't even spent the night at home? "Where is May? Why don't you father punish her?" Annoyed, she asked Uncle Tony Nakavala. Lily's heart sank a little, since she had already realized that her sister had left the house on purpose to guard her Rocky. She was his woman alone, and she wasn't ready to share. Rocky himself, on the other hand, had gone to town on business. There he saw a living mannequin of a naked girl who stood, shrouded in a transparent cloth in a wide window, and smiled at those who passed by. When the lad climbed the steps to the low porch, a large room, silk-curtained and welcomed in a friendly manner. "Whoever you want to the prettiest, but go to this house." Rocky pushed open the door, behind which bliss awaited him, bought with little money. "Here you can feel confident and free, as if the whole world lies at your feet." May squealed and cried silently. Lily thought she had been needlessly jealous of Rocky's sister. Why would he want someone so gloomy? She's nothing to talk about. If you were married, you wouldn't have time to read. As it is, what can you take from her? My brother's father waved his hand. "Give her in marriage." "I'm glad. Girls don't want it. They're waiting for something, but time goes on." Soon Barry's brother was married to the most beautiful girl. The wedding was at my uncle's house. Bells rang and there was singing. The master and mistress came out of the house to greet the young people with bread and salt. May, as soon as she ran out into the street, caught a glimpse of Rocky, but pretended not to notice him up close. Immediately she rushed towards him and began to say something with a smile. May furtively cast glances at her lover. The matchmaking was still not happening. She didn't know what to think, losing valuable strength. The child dreamed of how they would raise him together. Unnoticeably, it got dark. The young people were all having fun. When I stopped talking, Rocky took May aside. "Let's take a little walk." "Where is it?" "It's snowing so much." "I like to walk in the snow." "Where's your hat?" "I lost it somewhere." City. May moved in with her husband. She was happy and excited about the baby. Rocky was with her forever, but my husband continued his secret meetings with his mistress, who was unable to throw off the ties I was bound to Rocky by. The Saint torn in two didn't want to lose either his wife or his mistress. Lily lived agonizing days. It was unbearable to watch her sister's happiness. How much worse she was that she had to endure the position of mistress, and imagined, like Rocky spending the night with May. And then the anger and hatred in her mouth became bitter. She found no solace for herself in anything. The man she had truly loved, the man she had hoped for, had not become her husband. She had lost her dreams and hopes with him. She didn't know what to do with her life. But she loved Rocky, and that feeling was destroying her soul. She hugged him, kissed him. She was jealous of the man's wife with a mad passion. She lived a happy and carefree life. May was wrapped in loving tenderness. Rocky treated her attentively. When her belly visibly rounded, May told her husband about her pregnancy. "We're about to have a baby. Just dating, nothing happened. And all of a sudden, here we are. What do you want to say? How was your day? What happened in the past? I'm sorry you had to go through that. It's been 6 months." May didn't go to her father's house, no longer went to parties, and was often alone at home. The joyous day came. A grandmother delivered the baby. Soon the house was filled with miracles. A son was born to Rocky and May, who was named Sam. Boiling with anger, she decided to open her eyes to Rocky. She came to her sister's house, speaking at length and caustically recounting the details of her relationship with her estranged husband. Pain shot through May. She wanted to disappear, to hide from this world, but her baby sweetly blazing in her arms gave strength to the confidence that she could survive it. How much trouble she'd already overcome in her lifetime. And Rocky came home, found her on the doorstep. He saw her and realized that his sister had had enough of her silence. She stood up, coldly, looked at her lover and left. It was all over. May was crying. The little one also hummed. What's in store for us? Why doesn't anyone love us? God, why am I such a miserable girl? Angry with tears at the sobs, howled looking at her son. Along with the tears flowed out resentment, fear, confusion. And suddenly she felt that she didn't want to leave at all, but wanted to live together with Rocky to raise her son, so that her sister wouldn't shout in her face, so that people wouldn't whisper behind her back. She won. She gave birth to a big boy. She has a child. She'll live a happy life against all odds. For years, Rocky will beg forgiveness from his wife, who will stay with him for the sake of the baby. And then the irreparable happens. His wife will no longer have the strength to forgive. All that lifeline of waiting for love. The mind will remember the unhappy woman. Rocky will be orphaned in an instant and will be alone, having lost both his son and his wife. And May will hide from human prejudice in the city and soon meet a real man. Lily will accept the proposal of an American admirer, with whom Long corresponded on behalf of May. And then she suddenly decides to go to America, where she will live in luxury and wealth. But alas, without love. It seemed to Leo that the whole world was an ocean, and people were like sea creatures. The most beautiful and brightest fish are in view. Politicians, stars, and celebrities. Crabs swarm on the seashore. What not builders, what not traders. The water surface is cut now and then by the fins of sharks, which remind Leo of businessmen. And where is his place in this ocean of life? At the bottom. That's where the most unpleasant creatures like him hide. Their faces wrinkled, their bodies unnatural. But once upon a time, long ago, Leo was a shark, a goldfish. At the very least, he could have been a crab, cowering on the shore. But fate dealt him a different card, and Leo became a drifter. These guys come in many forms. There are those who collect aluminum cans from morning till night, doing the cheapest jobs. Others find a beggarly profession. They become street artists, luggage porters at train stations, cleaners in supermarkets. The most successful can even grab a bed in a room, but even with it you remain a beggar. Only now you worry not only about food and drink, but also about rent. And once you're behind on your rent, you're welcome to the streets. Leo was a vagrant of the lowest caste, from the very bottom. He begged in the crosswalks and at the train station, begging for change, which was barely enough for the cheapest food and drink. His comrades in misfortune called him Prince. Why? Only theorists talk about the bottom of life and rising from it. They look for reasons why people lose everything, even their own names and surnames, suggesting paths that resemble higher mathematics in their level of complexity. But Leo was a practitioner. He knew there was no bottom. You can always go a little lower. After the luxurious mansion of his parents, the brothels where all the vices of society thrive. After successful studies at an expensive university, it was to beg for change from passersby. He didn't go down that road quickly. No, Contrary to all the arguments of theorists, in practice falling into the abyss resembles climbing a mountain. Not everyone reaches the top. Not everyone falls to the bottom. There were many stairs between the mansion with the heated pool and the basement lodge. Friends' apartments, bunk beds in hostels, bunks in social sleepovers. Between the promising life of a future financier and a coin mug, deceptions, betrayal, and judgment. But it's all in the past. If you look at your past life from the bottom, it's covered by a column of murky water. Leo no longer looked to the past or the future. The planning horizon had shrunk to one day today. Not so bad, if you thought about it. He consoled himself with the thought that it could have been worse. Became a junkie like Pete, or froze his foot off like Joe. As it was, he was just an alcoholic, could walk on his own and even climb into deep basements. That's because he played sports in college. So the planning horizon and today, not such a bad day really. Today, Leo managed to scrounge up $4.92. Not enough for a bed in the lodge. We'll have to sleep in the basement. But a loaf of bread, a bottle of port, and a candy bar would do. Leo was too relaxed to move towards the beggar's store. He was already anticipating how he would open the port wine, how he would take the first sip. He counted in his mind that instead of a chocolate bar, he could buy the cheapest hot sausage or hamburger. How, after getting drunk, he would cozy up on the cardboard and dream about his past life. And then, all of a sudden, out of the blue, "Hey, Prince," a familiar voice called out to him. "Come here." "Well, I'm waiting." Oh no. He was too relaxed today and forgot about Theo. He's always avoiding this place. This territory where he's been zeroed in on so many times. Yeah, beggars have their own boundaries and domains. This place was ruled by a former boxer and street hooligan whose real name nobody knew. Everyone called him by his nickname in the ring, the Toreador or Theo. He's able to shake money from all the underprivileged and also from children, but not the ones who'd run to their parents to complain. Boxer somehow knows how to tell them apart. He's afraid of normal people, but not of lowlights like Leo. "What did you scrape up, huh?" Theo asked lazily. Leo had tried to challenge him for leadership once before and had gotten a very painful blow in the ear. He hadn't heard from him for a month. Now he tried to be polite to his tormentor. "Theo, please. I feel so bad." Leo asked. "I need a bottle badly. I'm dying." "Who's having a good time?" The ex-boxer asked. "You think I like it here, vetting guys like you? I'd like to be in the ring." "Footlights, a model with the round number. You ain't never been in a gym like this, have you?" "Where I boxed." "Well, what have you got? Show me." Leo remembered betting $1,000 on some boxer. What was his name? Tyler or Bronson? And he lost that time in a past life. And he wasn't even a little bit upset because his father had money in the bank. And now he's shaking on a low five. Theo took everything but $1. "Here, Prince," said the boxer with a smile, a few of his front teeth missing. "Go on and don't deny yourself anything." Leo sighed and wandered back. "We'd have to stand in the crosswalk some more and some more, but it's good in the mornings, and then in the evening rush hour when everyone comes home from work. 9 o'clock is dead time. For some innocent question about a couple of coins, you can get a punch in the forehead." Leo fixed his beard, smoothed his greasy hair. And then he saw her. No, it couldn't have been him. Just in case, the beggar left his passage and went to the next one. Leo felt his pulse quicken and his heart began to pound hard. She. No, it couldn't be. Nick was working in the next crosswalk. He probably already left, so he wouldn't mind. And there's a coffee machine. What do we got here? Check the change compartment, 10 cents. That's not bad. Nick was really nowhere to be found, so by the unwritten rules of beggars, he might as well take his place temporarily. To get a couple of dollars quickly, Leo decided to use a forbidden trick. He stood near the coffee machine and waited for someone to order a drink. "Good evening," he said to the man who had just thrown a $10 bill into the machine and pressed the lotto button. "I'm embarrassed to be addressing you, but go to hell," the stranger replied, shoveling change out of the change tray. What? Leo made a puzzled grimace, but the man didn't seem to be in a lyrical mood. "You must have misunderstood me." "Go, I said," he said. "You stink like the devil himself. Why did you come to me in the first place? I thought I was going to talk to a human being, and here." Then there was a little blackout. The stranger must have had enough and hit Leo. And it must have hit him in the solar plexus, because it was like the lights went out. The next moment, when the tramp came to his senses, he had a bill in his hand. $10. Leo, from surprise, almost fainted again. A whole $10. Enough for the night's lodging and the port. He wasn't hungry anymore. He nimbly tucked the bill into his sock and walked down neutral streets, where no one would claim his earnings. He walked up to his favorite little bed and breakfast with a shower. The best combination of price and quality, and the Castellan was clearly breathing heavily in his direction. But she'd probably send him to the showers now, since he hadn't been here in a month, if not two. When was the last time he stood under the jets of water? Now he'll wash up, trim his beard with a pair of scissors, trim his hairline a little, and run to the store. A convenience store, the kind where no one looks at your appearance. They'll have time to get drunk before 11 o'clock. Oh look, the lion cub's here, smiled the Castellan, revealing her missing teeth. Are you saving money, little one? Have you forgotten all about your mommy? Leo smiled and ignored her barb. It was better not to quarrel with that woman. After all, she was the only one who decided who would sleep in the bunk tonight and who would sleep outside. He slipped the Castellan a $10 bill, got $5 in change, and went to the 10th room. All the seats on the first tier were already taken. It was no trouble. He could go up to the second tier. Putting down the bag with his belongings, Leo rushed into the common bathroom. Free. Unlike dozens and hundreds of his fellows, he couldn't get used to the lack of hygiene. Every night, he could feel with his skin the urge to take a shower, and he suffered the most from it. Lathering his body with free soap, Leo literally got high. Then, looking in the mirror, he tried to cut the unruly hairs from his face and head. It was even worse than it had been. But it's okay, they'll grow back in a couple days. After the shower, the dirty clothes didn't want to fit on my body. They stuck. The laundry room was already closed because the dryer drum was making too much noise. You have to come early to use it. You always feel better after a bath. Even a wimp like Leo felt better. He looked at himself in the mirror. He looked almost young. How old is he? Leo tried to count in his mind. I think it was 33 or 34. And here he was already at the bottom. Leo remembered the starting point where it all began and sighed bitterly. The Castellan, who was clearly sympathetic to him, had given him a traditional sandwich and a disposable toothbrush. It seemed to be her duty, but not all visitors got the bonus. And let's face it, most of them didn't even know how to brush. Leo ate a sandwich with a thin layer of margarine and ham and brushed his teeth, noting the pain in several of them. I'll have to pull them out, he thought, or suffer through it. There was a note in the bag. He knew at once that the Castellan had written it. She wanted to meet him. There was no point in upsetting his aunt, but he wasn't going to reciprocate. Who did she think she was, after all? So he put the note in his pocket without unfolding it. He returned to the common room, climbed to the second tier, realized that he had forgotten to run for port wine. He closed his eyes and fell asleep, and in the lingering, restless slumber I saw her. The very day after which everything went wrong. The very minute after which he had descended or climbed to the bottom, and cried in his sleep and screamed, and the rest of the temporary roommates flinched and looked at the noisy guests with displeasure. In the morning, Leo woke up and remembered the note that had been in the sandwich bag. Where had it gone? The idea of making the Castellan happy didn't seem quite so crazy anymore. The note was found, but with difficulty. When Leo unfolded it and read it, his hair stood on end. Was it really her? Candy was over the moon. Love, true love. It was exactly what she used to read about in books and watch in movies growing up in her parents' home. There, in her native village, there was all nature, forest, river, horses. But she, like her sister, was always drawn to the city. It seemed to her that here she will quickly find happiness, and people will be friendly and kind to her. Alas, the city is 50% made up of knave fools like her. Just when Kendi was about to despair, he and his love appeared. To think that something like that could happen in real life. That's why she was over the moon, and still 2 months pregnant. It's just a pity that Leonard was in no hurry to bring clarity to their relationship. His face was as impenetrable as his father's. Candy thought he took the news of the pregnancy coolly. He even asked her to show him the test. But that didn't mean anything. Obviously, everyone takes the news of impending parenthood differently. But yesterday, I think it all became clear. Leonard took her to the lakeside, the most romantic place this side of the ocean. It'll be our secret, baby girl, he said, smiling for the first time in a long time. Leave your girlfriend a note saying you're leaving. I'll be waiting for you at our secret spot. And be sure to bring your suitcase. The place, however, was known to all the couples who preferred to seclude themselves in cars in this part of town. By a strange coincidence, her room was nearby. Candy couldn't afford a spacious apartment, but she didn't want to live on campus either. They'd be married soon, and they'd be sure to get a bigger place. She never told him anything about her sister. He thinks she's living with her girlfriend. Where are you going? Cindy asked. A secret, smiled Candy. Even though her sister is 2 years younger, Candy and Cindy looked like twins. They were often confused at school, though if you look closely, there were clearly more differences than similarities. Cindy is a little taller, and Candy is a little shorter, a couple of centimeters. The younger sister loved dramas and the older sister loved detectives. Candy went to law school and Cindy went to design school. But the sisters loved each other and never fought. In a big ruthless city, they could only count on themselves and each other. Where are you going, you little thing? Cindy wouldn't stop. Shut up, you little bug, laughed Candy. They often made up hurtful nicknames for each other. He said it should be our secret. Uh-huh, replied the younger one. Did the big boy have a conscience? Decided to take him somewhere beyond the parking lot for once. You don't understand anything. I told you, Candy said sharply. He's gonna propose. He will. God willing, Cindy replied. She was worried about her sister. After talking to the younger one, Candy was beginning to feel afraid too. She had convinced her so much that Leonard didn't really love her that she had doubts. Luckily, he would show up and all fears would immediately fade away. They drove to their secret place and there, Sydney did not yet know that her sister was in an interesting position. Leonard had forbidden her to tell anyone. He's very superstitious. You'll be dancing at my wedding, whispered Candy, you'll see. Oh, sister, answered Cindy. They had nowhere to hide from each other in the small room. The only thing that helped was the common terrace, where they could go out and get some air. The enterprising owners divided the rooms with partitions and rented their small house to 10 guests at once. At first, it was not easy for the girl to share the territory with so many people. There were only 2 bathrooms and 1 kitchen for such a crowd. Squabbling, crowding, constant noise, all the charms of life in a huge city, but it's cheap. Leonard showed her another world, another universe. Everything was different on the planet of luxury and wealth. Huge houses with swimming pools and saunas, fancy cars, expensive suits and ties. They met by chance. In order to simplify the life of her father and mother, Candy got a job in a bar for the rich to sell flowers to drunken guests at night. The first time they met, Leonard bought a whole basket of them. I would like to take to these luxurious flowers their charming salesman, he smiled. The young man, whom the sister scornfully called a major, drove her out of town in his luxurious Cadillac. He spoke beautiful words, praised her perfect figure, and then she was a little ashamed. But Leonard said it was normal, and some people were literally made for each other. Since then, he'd come to see her a couple times a week, taking her to that secret spot. Then he'd drive her back, and at her request, drop her off about 200 meters from her house. She thought it was a relationship. You're a fool, the younger one said, but Candy wouldn't listen to her. In the morning, when her sister was still asleep, the girl took her suitcase and carefully walked out the door. The whole big house was resting, so there was an unaccustomed silence in the rooms. No one was to see her leave this place forever. Candy had been lucky. No one else from her town, which for some reason was called the village, and ever won a law school grant. In class, the children of rich and successful parents, of course, teased her about her accent, her cheap clothes. But Leonard balanced it all out, and when she found out she was going to have a baby, she was scared at first. First of all, college. But you can take a sabbatical for at least a year. She's in good standing, she's bound to get favorable treatment. Secondly, finances. But Leonard's parents have a lot of money, they should be able to make it work. Thirdly, she was just scared. Although it was only the 10th week of pregnancy, her body had already begun to metamorphose. What would happen next? Good morning, baby. He smiled and opened the trunk with a button. Load it in there. Little things like that, of course, annoyed Candy. She had to put the suitcase in the trunk herself. Good thing it was light. Leo never opened the door for her, rarely hugged her in public, hardly ever gave her gifts. Once he brought her to his parents' house, a luxurious mansion. But he wouldn't even introduce her to mom or dad. On the contrary, he walked her through the back door like a spy. But love gave her the strength to forgive. So what if they'd only known each other a few months? Yes, he's arrogant, impulsive, but he's still her man. The drive to Lakeside wasn't a short one, and Kendi dozed off, stretching out in the back seat. She adored both Leonard and his Cadillac. They were both so easy and comfortable. "Wake up, baby," her husband-to-be said. "We're here." Cold enough as it was, today he outdid himself. Looking around, Leonard strode forward. He didn't even look in her direction. It was obvious he was worried. Lakeside was very quiet in the mornings, and at this time, not a soul at all. Of course he's going to propose, Kendi reassured herself. It's not an easy step to take. It's understandable. Leonard climbed higher and higher to the cliff. From there, he had a magnificent view of the vast lake. Whether it was the pregnancy or the early awakening, the girl found it difficult to walk. Her man didn't even look back, and the gap between them grew wider and wider. She was treading on the polished stones of the path, and her strength to move on was diminishing. "Would you help me?" she finally asked, and felt a pang of guilt. She couldn't handle anything on her own. "Oh, I'm sorry," he replied, and hurried back for Kendi. Leonard supported her, but in a detached way. Coldly. That's not how one holds a future wife, the girl thought. Is he really that worried? There was no one on the cliff at this early hour. The view was indeed breathtaking. A light haze was rising over the lake. Together, they walked to the very edge of the cliff. She looked thoughtfully into the distance and imagined herself as a bird flying over the water. He said, "I don't even know what to say." "Tell it like it is." Kendi smiled without turning around. She looked ahead, admiring the scenery. Strong hands grabbed her shoulders and turned her around. The girl realized that he wanted to kiss her. In general, long conversations were not easy for him. But Leonard knew the language of love perfectly. Kendi smiled, though her man's grip on her seemed too strong. "I want to memorize your eyes," he said. "What?" The girl wondered, and in the same second loving hands sharply pushed her away. She felt the ground go from under her feet, and from surprise, she couldn't even scream. Leo opened his eyes. Nightmares again. He saw her again. At times, the vagabond completely forgot the green eyes and could live in peace. In the daylight, he rarely felt remorse. But at night, he was much more concerned about his ringing head. To think he hadn't had a drop of liquor last night, it felt like he'd been drinking half the night. Leo wanted to lie down for another half an hour. They would kick him out of the lodging house at 8 in the morning, and it was only 7. But something was keeping him from lying down. Something burrowed into his rib like a parasite. The vagrant scratched the spot lazily, and his hand came across a piece of paper. Exactly, the same note the Castellan had given him. Leo unfolded it, and the greasy hairs on his head stirred. "Miss me." The vagrant jumped down from the second tier and immediately began to gather up his unpretentious belongings. The fellow beggars grumbled unhappily. They hadn't paid $5 each to be woken up by a hobo this early. But Leo did not listen to the disgruntled voices. He was possessed by an animal fear that drove him away. After years of vagrancy, no emotion lingers in the soul for long, and so his fear subsided when he reached the crossing of his hometown. The townspeople were in a hurry to get to work, which meant it was time for him to get to work too. He pulled a cup of coffee from the trash can, opened the lid, and drank the rest with relish. Then he reached out and started collecting coins. It's the Castellan playing around, Leo thought. What a naughty old thing. Certainly she was always paying him favors, and once she'd even given him an extra sandwich. She was very lucky. The woman had found this sweet position years ago. And before that, they say, also wandered. She's paid well, $100 a week, but she has to work 12 or 14 hours a day. Cleaning up after guys like him is not much of a job. No, Leo couldn't do it. He hated boring jobs that took up all his free time. Stock trading was his thing. It was his thing. It's a man's sport. But if you get hurt in the stock market, you're out of the field for the rest of your life, or in the ring for that matter. "Good morning, miss," he said, nodding to his regulars. "Thank you for the coin." "Good day, sir. Thank you." Whenever there was a decent amount of money in the cup, it was supposed to be hidden. Leave a few coins so passersby could see he wasn't just standing there, he was working. Leo was so accustomed to sitting without a penny in his pocket that he didn't even immediately remember the $5 left over from last night. Slapping himself on the forehead, He put the change in his pocket, threw the cup in the trash, and went to the cafe. He's not allowed in decent places. He goes to the beggar's canteen only when absolutely necessary. Not only do they feed him bread and margarine, but they make him recite prayers and sing songs and repent. And Leo hates admitting his own mistakes. Even though he wasn't allowed in the McDonald's lounge, he could go on McDrive if there were no cars. Once upon a time he could pull it here in his own Cadillac. It was almost impossible to believe. Leo bought 2 hamburgers, fries, and a double Americano. It was almost $6, but it was worth it. Sitting down at the curb, he enjoyed his meal. Eating, of course, was uncomfortable. He, as a visitor, had the right to sit at a table, to sit on a soft couch. Most likely he had, but he didn't use it. After all, the staff could have called the cops, or the next time they wouldn't sell him anything at all. Leo quickly swallowed the buns and cutlets, and now sipped his coffee with pleasure. He took a sip and put the glass on the pavement. It had been a long time since he'd had that drink. Makes him feel better than booze. Leo was looking ahead when he heard a nasty but familiar sound. Someone had kicked the glass. The rest of the coffee spilled onto the pavement. Theo was standing next to him, grinning. Theo. Leonard was outraged. Why? Why? Theo looked surprised. Because I can, Prince. Get it? What are you doing here? You good for nothing? Leo almost cried in helplessness. Just think about it. Some city lunatic takes his honestly earned money, pours out his coffee, and rubs his sides. The tramp didn't want to put up with it, but he couldn't do anything about it either. Complain to the police. They wouldn't let him out of the station. Fight back. Why are you sitting there when I'm talking to you? Theo planted his foot on his chest and gave him a painful squeeze. Leo's breath caught. Sorry, he replied, rubbing the bruised area. I'm exhausted. So you're eating burgers without me. Theo continued and gave him a hard slap. I wish you'd offered. I haven't had a poppy seed since this morning. Leo jumped up from the blow, rubbing his cheek. They were standing near the roadway. Sure, you don't see cars around here that often. But by the unspoken rule of the beggars, this area was considered a no man's land, and anyone can come and sit in silence and solitude. Theo was breaking those rules and he knew it. Listen, boxer, began Leo, trying to speak conciliatory. I don't need any trouble. I'm going to leave now. I don't have any more money. I don't have any belongings either. You? Boxer grabbed him by the shoulders and set him down on the curb. He smirked. How much strength did he have left in him? When the tramp tried to get up, Theo prevented him from doing so. He'd slap his cheeks lightly, but hurtfully, and then he'd hit him on the head, then on the legs, throwing Leo to the dead grass, and openly mocked him. Such behavior was frowned upon among beggars. They were the dregs of society, not teenagers. None of the vagabonds found out relationships just for the love of the art of conflict. Leo tried to crawl back, but Theo, with half a toothless grin, chased after him, stepped on his foot. And then, "Can I help you?" He heard a woman's voice and turned around. The woman, one of those kind-hearted madams ready to separate vagrants, looked nothing like her. But for some reason it seemed otherwise to Leo. He jumped up and darted across the street, and just blew away Theo, who was trying to block his way. The former boxer flew a couple of meters to the center of the road and almost hit a rare car that passed here once an hour or less. Leo was running for his life, and somehow unknown to him, he found himself back in his native passage. Here he felt at once calmer, as if he had returned to his own home. Even the townspeople looked at him with a little less contempt. Of course they did, because he was working here, not just hanging around. I think the lack of booze was starting to make him crazy. I should have bought a bottle of good old port instead of a double Americano. Besides, it's the same price. And now, because of his forced sobriety, Leo's head began to have bad thoughts. Yes, he did it 10 years ago or so. And now he's in agony. But you can't admit it to anyone. You have to deny it. Luke had spent more hours on the road than one could imagine. For some reason, no one in his neighborhood wanted to be a traffic cop. So he was always on duty, often without a partner. Other policemen without help is afraid even to go to the store, but Luke is not like that. But no one wants to mess with him. He's the biggest cop in the tourist part of town. And there's nothing going on here if you ask me. When Luke sees the dark red car, he turns on his blinkers. An expensive Cadillac with chrome hubcaps stopped. The driver's window rolled down. "Is there a problem, officer?" Leonard asked, smiling nonchalantly, though he was actually scared. "Just an ID check," the patrolman replied. He hated big guys in expensive cars. To look at him, he wasn't even 25 yet. He never worked a day in his life. And the car cost as much as his house or even more. Luke quickly assessed the car. Rare, probably custom built. Leonard put his hands on the steering wheel not only because the radio had taught him to do so. He couldn't stop his fingers from trembling. So that the officer wouldn't see it, he squeezed the leather steering wheel. It was soothing, but not very soothing. After he'd gotten away unnoticed, it would be foolish to get caught by some thug. "Insurance expired, sir," the cop said. "I'd better get a new one." "Thank you," Leo smiled. He didn't even want to explain that this car had a separate insurance policy, which was as thick as a book. "Can I go now?" "Have a safe trip." The cop heard the walkie-talkie and immediately ran to the car. Something had happened on the lakeside again. He heard the investigation team and the rescue squad being called. It wasn't his department. He never understood how those smart guys investigated crimes. He was only interested in the chases. Adrenaline, tires squealing, driving on the edge. That was the life he liked. But crime, no, not that, no. It's better to stand on the road, all alone, even without a partner. And then years later, a smart guy poked Luke with a picture of a hobo. Tangled hair, hunted look. Apparently, it was taken by a homeless outreach service called The Way Back. Who needs the scum of the earth? Luke, who was in his final months of service before retirement, struggled to remember. But the further he got, the more he thought the smart guy in the white shirt was just messing with him. "Do you recognize him?" "Well, ask the officer," one of the ones Luke called jackets. They don't even wear real uniforms. "You know, son, I'm sorry," the old cop said, making sure not to offend the smart guy. "He looks like a regular hobo. I'll put 5 of these in a row for you. You wouldn't know the difference." "Master Luke, think back." The officer wouldn't let it go. "Red Jaguar, burgundy leather interior. Very rare around here. Didn't this guy look like the driver?" The old cop couldn't take it anymore and laughed. "No, just think about it. This misunderstanding behind the wheel of a Yaga? Who would let him into the cabin of such an expensive car? The burgundy leather, oh." In his thoughts, Luke stroked the noble surface. If a hobo like that got into a car like this, he'd spit him out like a fly. "Son," said the traffic cop, "I'll tell you like it is. Beggars don't drive cars, not unless they steal one. And if a lump like that stole a Jaguar with a maroon interior, I'd kill myself to chase him down. And you would have found my report, son, even years later." "All right," the smart guy wouldn't give up. "How about this one?" The investigator took out another photograph. It had a completely different face on it. Happy, smarmy. Girls like that. A yellow tie tied on a white shirt. And the smile. There's $100 invested in that smile. Has he ever seen one of these? "Do you recognize this one?" the investigator asked. "Give it to me," Luke asked. He held the card up to his eyes. Red Jaguar, leather steering wheel. I think it was the day the girl was pulled from the bottom of the lake. The kind of pretty redneck he'd seen a picture of on the news later. But is it him? Or did he just look like a rich kid, the son of rich parents? And was there a Jaguar? Absolutely not. "I'll tell you this," Luke sighed. "Typical Major. I've pulled them over a lot. Drunk, half dead. Maybe you got a picture of the car." The investigator crinkled his nose. Of course, there was no photo. After all, the traffic cops all look alike. Vagrants or rich guys. Cars are another matter, but he didn't have a picture of the Jaguar. The expensive car must have disappeared into a private collection, and the new owner did not respond to the numerous requests of the police in the local newspapers, or just didn't read them. "Bless you," Luke replied, rising from his chair and heading for the exit. He was angry that the smartest had made him come all this way, just for the sake of showing a picture of a hobo and a major. Investigator Mark sighed. It seemed he never solved this murder. And was there really a murder? It's convenient to have a body and a knife. Or a body and a gun. Ideal when the perp tells someone about his exploits. Some guys kill someone, and soon the whole town knows who and when. What does he, Mark, have on this guy? Testimony from interested parties. Circumstantial evidence. The girl had at least a few reasons to kill herself. Several. But something kept Mark on his toes. something that kept him going over and over again through the paperwork of the county's most notorious cold case. And it wasn't just that poor woman's restless sister, of course. No, some inner feeling compelled him to leaf through the file again and again. A beggar's everyday life is like snowflakes or raindrops. The constant search for food and drink, running from the police, cheating social services. For some reason, everyone who does not live on the streets considers vagrants as violators and criminals. Not at all. There is much more grayness and humility among them than one might imagine at first glance. After so many years of wandering, Leo convinced himself that he liked the nomadic life, and in a normal world, he would simply wither away like a plant left without water. "Come here, Prince," Theo almost shouted. Come here, come here." Leo involuntarily wrinkled his nose. This boxer had broken every possible rule of life on the street, coming to deal with him in his own crosswalk. It was tantamount to a declaration of war, and what would he fight for? His street will be fatter. You can gut schoolboys, shake coins out of alcoholics. What about here? Standing around with a mug, baiting for change from the townspeople? "Okay, Theo, back off," Leo demanded. "This is my turf. See, I'm working. You're gonna scare away all my customers. Your territory." Theo was indignant. "You work here. You threw me in front of a car, asshole. You made me scratch my side." "I apologize," said the tramp. "I didn't mean to, really." "Sorry." Theo's eyes went wide with anger. Here, a powerful left hook sent Leo crashing to the ground, a side effect of street life. He'd learned to fall so he'd take as little damage as possible, like an expert stuntman. But the stars danced in front of his eyes. He felt dizzy, and the light seemed a little dimmer. Theo smirked and lifted his leg to consolidate his success, but his puny body was pinned against the wall. "Cops! What the hell is this?" Theo said indignantly as his arms were pulled down with a police collar. "How dare you, huh? I'm in a free country. Read me my rights." "Shut up," the cop replied and pinned the former boxer against the wall. He probably lost a good half of his teeth from those blows. "I'll read you your license." "Not on my street." "Hey, man, you need some help?" That question was addressed to Leo. He touched his injured cheek. It hurt, but it was bearable. Theo must have hit it half-heartedly. His teeth didn't even wobble. No, he couldn't go down to the station. First of all, the boxer could add to it in the car. 2, the other guys would think he's a snitch. Theo's own fault. He got himself in trouble. 3, they'll be sure to make a report on him at the station. "It's all right, officer," Leo replied, getting up. "I'm looking for a job. I've been begging recently, honestly. I haven't quite figured out what it's all about yet." "A job?" the cop asked incredulously. "That's right. Begging, is not Christian. For your diligence and humility, you're entitled to a special prize. Here you go." He handed him a coupon for the lodging house. That's lucky. For the second day in a row, he could shower and sleep in a bed. The coupon came with a $10 trip to the municipal cafe. Of course, they'd cheat him out of his money and give him a glass of tea instead of a Coke. But it's better than eating a bun and port again. "Thank you, officer," Leo bowed. "I feel much better. Permission to go." But the cop was no longer paying any attention to him. He turned around and pushed Theo in front of him, and he was eager to turn around and say what he thought about law and order in this country. But the policeman had a firm grip on the detainee's shoulder, and he could only express his indignation with his back. Tucking the coupon into his pocket, Leo raised the mug in front of him. But because of the stupid bruise on his cheek, the stream of change had dried up, and so had his desire to collect it. Today, the townspeople were shying away from him, reluctant to throw coins. By 1 p.m., the vagrant had collected a little more than $1. Soon, however, a cafe would open where he could redeem the coupon, then buy a bottle of port and get really drunk. The things Leo regretted weren't easy to count. He was about 40% regret himself, like whiskey made of alcohol. His father was stingy, even though he was literally sitting on money. His investment fund was considered one of the strongest on the West Coast. There was a minimum of servants in the huge house, and the table was bursting with treats only when there were guests. The rest of the days they ate not so much poorly, but not richly either. His father forbade Leo everything and demanded complete obedience. He, the only child in the family, felt like a black sheep in the company of his peers. While the other children of rich parents bought expensive toys, taken to the best resorts in the world, he was forced to listen to his father's admonitions. He paid only for the bare necessities, he had taste. At some point, the parent decided that it was time for his son to stop moving the bag. "Your first car," his father said, handing him the keys to a red Cadillac. "You have to drive something to the school building, right?" Leo was speechless at the sight of it. His father had many cars, a whole collection, but he rarely used them. Mom even drove a mass-produced Honda. Not a bad car, but clearly does not match the status of a millionaire's wife. Cadillac, against this background, looked like an alien from the planet of luxury. "Dad, are you serious?" then asked Leo, not believing his happiness. "Yes, but..." And he immediately came up with a whole bunch of terms and conditions for using the cars. They were stupid, but on the plus side, Leo wasn't going to abide by them. He couldn't wait to drive his beauty up to campus and park it in the faculty parking lot. Hardly anyone would say a word to him. Contrary to his father's wishes, his son grew up to be a spender. He went to expensive clubs and restaurants, bought things in boutiques, and sometimes even just squandered money. All of his son's financial shenanigans were covered by his mom. She somehow wrote off his expenses, transferring them to his father's fund. Leo didn't want to go into details. All that mattered was that everything was nice and decent. How old was he then? 22, I think. The joy of owning a collector's Cadillac was short-lived. His parent passed away, and Leo discovered a terrible truth. It's been many years since the foundation, one of the strongest on the coast, went bankrupt. By some unknown inertia of luxury, the family had been living in debt all these years. Neither Leo nor his mother had noticed the telltale signs of financial insolvency all that time, though they might have. As soon as his father died, there was no one to fend off the attacks of creditors. The expensive collection of cars went up for auction, as did the luxurious house. All that survived was a red Cadillac, his mother's jewelry, and some personal effects. And that, if not for the advice of a lawyer, they might have given the creditors even that. Leo sat down at a beggar's table away from the main hall. He can't go near the handouts. The police might be called. All that's left is to wait for an employee to take the coupon and ring it up. The morning breakfast was long forgotten, and Leo was starving. And thirsty. Finally, a cafe employee appeared near him, and the vagrant held out his coupon to him. "So waiter," Leo began. He was in a good mood. "I'll have an aperitif to start with." But the social worker didn't appreciate his joke. He took the tear-off coupon, threw the rest on the table, and disappeared. For a long 20 minutes, the tramp waited until he was served his legitimate food. Finally, the cafeteria employee brought a pathetic cutlet, a small spoonful of mashed potatoes, bean soup, and a whole plate of bread. And that was for $10. What about the selection? Leo was indignant. "Where are the vegetables? Where's the cheese?" "Eat what you're given," the employee said, "or I'll call the cops. You'll go hungry, understand?" The hobo sighed and started eating his lunch. The big advantage of mashed potatoes, cutlets, and bean soup is that you don't have to chew them. Along with the human form, the street takes away the teeth of its inhabitants. Even if you protect them like the apple of your eye during fights and police interrogations, diseases are bound to do their work. Leo chewed and thought that 10 years ago he would have just walked past a cafe like this. But today he considered it a great fortune to dine there. Paul had gotten used to being hired for all sorts of nonsense, but even for him, this assignment was too much. It's one thing to find a cat or a dog. At least that's where his profession as a private investigator comes in. You call trapping services, drive around shelters, and try to compare a picture of the animal with the one you're offered to pick up. But following a stray? Yes, he has the proud distinction of being a retired police officer on his resume. He spent 20 years looking for criminals with mixed success, so he understood the ins and outs of the craft. But the initiated know that his resume should have been read between the lines. After all, Paul retired, but without a pension. It was the usual way for those who got knocked up. And he, being retired, had no pension and no obvious prospects, so he took on everything. Even such a ridiculous assignment as following the vagrant. He named his usual rate of $100 a day, and the client did not even flinch. At first glance, it seemed like a lot of money. But in fact, after all the deductions and taxes, after gasoline and dry cleaning, there was a pittance left to live on, and he didn't have a job every day. The client paid well. He made it a rule never to argue with customers, and it really worked. He made notes in his notebook during the conversation, but it was more for show. Paul's memory had not failed him so far, and he easily memorized all the information. to follow the strange guy in the drab coat, to find out as much information about his past as possible. But there was a hitch. The detective knew the homeless too well, and to get any information at all, you have to do a lot of work. Optimally, you have to become homeless himself. Paul used his own channels to confirm the name Leonard, and then, just in case, to get more information about the client. Her request seemed very strange, and the name too familiar. He should have turned Cindy down, if only because he'd been involved in the case in the past, but he needed the money too badly. He also wanted to get to the bottom of it. Paul reported his findings not only to his client, but also to Mark. At some point, he even felt like he was back in the service. He longed for both the badge and the gun. In a few days of stalking the homeless man, he'd made some progress. For one thing, he got Chris to give him the note. She didn't even have to pay extra. She already knew him well enough to help him. Secondly, to realize that the tramp's heart was scratching. Paul couldn't believe that the same major had turned into the dregs of society. Fate is a villain. Alcohol must be to blame. At first, his client's assignment seemed nice. To trace, to photograph, to plant a note. But her new assignment looked strange even for this series. Out of old habit, Paul only nodded and agreed. After all, he reserved the right to run the errand for himself. As soon as they said goodbye, the private detective immediately went to the phone booth and started looking for change. This attribute of the past had almost left the streets of their city. Why the booths when everyone has a great phone in his pocket? Only great individuals like him must have continued to use the booths. "Hey, Mark," Paul said, "you sit down there and get a firm grip on the table. Even a dry guy like you might not be able to take it and break." When Luke was out the door, Mark took out a cigarette and lit it. He liked his tobacco the strongest, the kind that made you all chipper. The investigator felt he was wasting his time. Today was exactly 10 years since Kindy's body had been pulled from the cold water. This case had gone back and forth so many times that Mark had lost count. Now Cindy's gonna come to him again, only not so young, and play the old record. "Understand, detective," she'd say 5 minutes later. She couldn't have committed suicide. The day before, she'd shared her plans with me. She was going to be picked up in the morning by that major. The one I've told you about 100 times, but you're in no hurry to check my story. Mark nodded, but his heart was beginning to boil. An experienced policeman, he never argued with relatives of victims or injured parties. He tried not to interrupt. But Cindy was a special guest. She was testing his patience like no one else. He's gonna snap any minute now. Oh, come on. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore. So many years have passed, and we still don't know if it was really murder. Even I'm not sure, you know. How are we going to convince a court of law? Cindy cried. What a stiff-necked jerk. Of course, the woman has a tragedy. Her sister died falling off that cliff. Mark's already ruled 10 times to dismiss the case. He's made a convincing case for why Kindy would do such a thing. He reported that he'd never been able to locate the big guy in the red Jaguar. But there were still doubts in his heart, and some theories were still being tested. Here, Cindy said, holding out her cell phone. I recognize this car. Take a look. Without much hope, the investigator looked at the screen. Of course, it's not a Jaguar, it's a Cadillac. Just one detail, but what an effect. The car, of course, is luxurious. Those toys that are now coming off the assembly line and in the footsteps of the cars of the 80s. They knew how to do it. We recently went to a retro exhibition with my husband, said the girl, wiping her tears. And there I saw this car. Of course, I could be wrong, but it looked very similar. Did you take a picture of the license plate? The investigator asked hopefully. The girl took her cell phone and started moving the pictures around. She took a good 100 pictures of the Cadillac. And only on one of them the license plate number could somehow be made out. Luck. Mark dumped the pictures onto his computer and transcribed the license plate number. Immediately, he sent a message to the chat room to have the guys in information services prepare a full background on the car. He should have the file any minute now. Turns out he hadn't done everything. Every time Mark took the case, he had mixed feelings about it. On the one hand, it bored the hell out of him. On the other hand, he wanted to solve the mystery. It was probably because of the scandalous case that his career never got off the ground. It's been 10 years since he's been stuck in the district. Thank you, Mark said with a smile. I'll do my best. I'm sorry I snapped, miss. The girl was silent and wouldn't leave. She didn't like him, did she? Cindy had gone from redneck to strong and confident woman before his eyes. She seemed to be a designer and even a success. Every year she looked better and better, and the cars she drove to the station were more and more in line with the average person's idea of a successful life. That's not all. Cindy stretched out. I think I found him. Who? Mark was surprised. I think that girl decided to finish him off today. The killer, answered the guest in a broken voice, but this time she didn't cry. The other extreme of life on the streets is immense boredom. Once the basic needs are met, the beggar has nothing else to do. And out of boredom, vagrants start doing all sorts of obscene things. They drink anything that burns. They start other people's cars, climbing into open houses. After a heavy lunch, Leo was not even lazy and went to the bathroom to wash his hands properly and get all the crumbs out of his beard. He looked at himself in the mirror. Yes, it looked really scary. His black hair is tangled. His beard ages him 10 years, and that's at least. Dirty clothes all at small and large holes. It seems like in his past life Leo washed his hands before eating, and he didn't have a beard at all. He didn't want to go to the crossing, and there was nothing to do. Beggars don't have hobbies. His failing eyesight and lack of habit don't even allow him to read books. Besides, when you immerse yourself in the story, you become too open-minded. Someone could steal your backpack or something. That leaves alcohol. The tramp counted the coin and small bills in his pocket. It was an impressive sum, for which he could buy 2 or even 3 bottles of port. But he might not be allowed into the lodging if he took so much fuel into himself. Even for him, the Castellan would not make a discount, so it was necessary to buy a bottle, go inside and drink it right in the bathroom. There was still plenty of time before the lodge opened, so Leo decided to just walk around town. So when his father died, he thought he was truly free. Bankruptcy didn't scare him at first, because he just didn't believe in it. His mother didn't survive the financial collapse and ended up in a community hospital. Leo initially visited her a few times in the first year, and what he saw made a lasting impression on him. "We're fabulously rich, Leonard," she used to say when we met. "See how big my house is? Only the servants won't give me my china for some reason. Can you tell them to put it up when you arrive?" Some philanthropist has given an outdated mansion to a hospital, and Mother feels like she owns the place. And the doctors and staff are personal servants. Mother even tried to keep track of expenses, like in her own home. She didn't rampage at all, so her antics were treated with humor rather than anger. Everyone was amused except Leo, so he found it best not to show up at the hospital. His father had died just in time. Leo was finishing college and preparing for a career in finance. He was not going to become a clerk in someone else's fund and slowly, step by step, rise to the top of the stock market. Leo sold his luxurious Cadillac to some collector for a substantial sum of money, not only because he needed the money, but also to forget about her. After all, Candy's eyes sometimes appeared in his mind's eye. Leo started his own foundation, trying to make a splash in everyone's eyes. Like his father, he was trying to build a financial soap castle. He must have succeeded if it hadn't been for his parents' collapse. But his last name became a curse, not a mantra of success. When the partners heard it, they were slow to hand over huge sums of money, and the stock market is a conveyor belt. The abilities, which were so often talked about by teachers at the university, for some reason did not bear fruit. Lack of experience undermined the budding financier, and gradually Leo lost everything, including his dignity. The fund went bust, but it took him only a few months, not decades like his father. Now, walking down the street in his rags, Leo doubted the reality of the past at all. Had it really happened to him? Or had he dreamed it in the same cellars and lodgings where he suffered after cheap wine? After experiencing a second collapse, Leo fell into despair. A regular job was out of the question. Perhaps at the beginning, he could have gotten a job at a bank, become a paralegal or a salesman in a salon, but he didn't want a handout. He wanted to be at the top of the pyramid, not at the bottom. After the failed fund, he borrowed a lot of money from friends from his past life. Anyone who could give him any decent amount of money. Claimed he was about to inherit. Leo was still very persuasive back then. They believed him, and he didn't skimp on future interest. Having collected a substantial sum, the young man began to think about where to invest it. And this time, for some reason, he decided to play in the casino. His impeccable education instilled in him the false idea that playing the system will definitely bring a big score. If the agony of the fund lasted for several months, then the effort in the casino only a couple of days. Going out on the street without a penny in his pocket, Leo realized that now no one would ever trust him with a bill larger than $20. There was only one way to the bottom of the pyramid, which he was so eager to conquer. Next came a trial and 12 months in prison. He was even released a few days early for good behavior. Life in the State House finally managed to reconcile him with reality. He will never rise to the top, never become a goldfish or at least a jellyfish. He's left to wander on the bottom. Years passed. Leo attributed his financial failures to karma. He didn't owe the universe, he owed it a huge debt. If the first month on the street you are still making plans, dreaming of returning to normal life, then a year later it is no longer possible. The smell of sweat ceases to bother you, and leftovers from the supermarket tank seem not the worst option for breakfast and dinner. Over the years, he's realized that his fall to rock bottom started with that very trip, and the crime he committed. To forget, he had to drink wine. His feet carried him to a cheap store where, even with his paltry sum, Leo could feel like a king. But suddenly he froze, hesitating, afraid to cross the street. On the corner stood she, and seemed to be looking in his direction. She looked left and right and started to cross the street. Leo wanted to run, but his legs wouldn't obey him. Mark had no illusions about going to the rich estate. It seemed to him that he was wasting his time, and that the rich people were just mocking him and his old fort. Surprisingly, the person on the other end of the line did not refuse to look at the Cadillac, but asked him to drive across the street for the servants. He also promised not to report anything to the newspapers, although the investigator did not even think about it. The servants rode. Mark resented it as he drove down the highway. Then he had to turn onto a narrow asphalt road with trees overhanging it. A huge estate opened up before him. The owner definitely had taste, because the house was perfect no matter which way you looked at it. Drive through, the guard waved his hand, looking at the documents. They're waiting. Over there. He could use a map to get around the estate. Mark drove up to the huge building and almost physically felt his own squalor. What he thought was a gymnasium turned out to be a giant garage. Waiting for him outside the building was a real butler. Despite the hot weather, the man wore a white shirt with some strange ruffles and a black jacket. "Good afternoon," nodded the butler. "We are pleased to welcome you to Mr. White's manor." He has readily responded to assist in the investigation. "Mr. White was unable to receive you himself and asked me to convey his deepest apologies. The fact is that a gentleman from the government is visiting him today. If necessary, I can invite them both." "No need," Mark replied. He tried to hold himself loosely, but he clearly lacked the necessary manners. "This is, an unofficial visit. I'm investigating a very old case." "Oh, don't get me started on the details," the man asked and opened the door. They entered a glass room. "Let me show you the whole collection, and you can choose the car that is of interest to you. We are ready to provide it for inspection at any time of the day or night, but we can't seize it. There's hardly a judge in the county who'll sign a warrant. Come on in, but don't forget to wear booties." Mark walked into the garage and literally couldn't believe his eyes. It was as if a wizard had enlarged his son's cars and arranged them in perfect order. What was there? Expensive Ferrari, Jaguar, Mercedes, Aston Martin. Mark walked across the perfectly white tile floor. In the garage, he saw 3 engineers in white coats examining a vintage American, the make of which he couldn't name, and marking something on their clipboards. "Yes, that's it." The investigator nodded at the red car. The butler kept pace with him. "Mr. White doesn't just collect cars," the butler said. "He also shows them off to the world. If a car has a criminal history, we can help unravel it." "I don't think the Cadillac is guilty of anything," the investigator shrugged. He opened the door to the cabin, peered inside. Surprisingly, the butler didn't ask for gloves, but was wiping everything down with a napkin. "I looked in the trunk. So many years had passed. What had he hoped for, really?" The car looked sterilely clean, like it had just come off the assembly line. "The specialty of this model is the interior," the butler said. "It's a one-of-a-kind car. Pay attention to the inner trim of the air duct, steering wheel, gearbox overlay. Only 100 examples of this saloon ever rolled off the assembly line. As you understand, only a few have reached our days." "Do you remember who drove it before?" the investigator clarified. In fact, he knew the answer to this question. "Of course. I myself purchased this stunning specimen." "The car was in terrible condition," Butler said. It was obvious it had been used as an everyday car. That's not acceptable when you're talking about collector's virgins. But most surprisingly, a suitcase was found in the trunk. The previous owner was so absent-minded that he even forgot to take it out. I doubt he even looked in the trunk. That's interesting, said the investigator. Can you describe it? I'm talking about the suitcase. Come on, I'll show you, the man shrugged. I could throw it away, but such things should be handled with care. Mark and the butler went into a room in the garage. The whole wall was taken up by drawers, like store lockers. The man took out a huge magazine, checked some records, and approached the box. He opened it with a universal key he pulled out of his jacket. No way, Mark exhaled, taking the suitcase. Fantastic. Hallucinations are a sure sign of a mental disorder caused by alcohol intake. But they can visit a person not only during heavy drinking. It is enough not to drink for a few days, and here you begin to see something that in reality does not exist. To stop the trembling in his hands, Leo begged a glass of instant coffee from the Help for Everyone tent. The taste was disgusting, but the caffeine was doing its job. Leo had one question. Had he really pushed that girl off the cliff? I think he'd seen an obituary in the local paper, but he wasn't sure anymore. No one had ever questioned him about that day, never asked him if he'd gone to the lakeside, never charged him or detained him. What if she didn't really exist? The same questions could be addressed to himself. There was a psychologist on duty at the Help for Everyone tent. That was exactly the kind of specialist the vagrant lacked. It was strange, of course, in his position to ask such questions, but there was no queue of those who wanted to talk to the specialist anyway. Hello, said Leo. If I may, I'd like to make an appeal. I've been plagued by intrusive images lately. They keep appearing in my head. Yes, of course, the woman nodded. Call me Al. I'm always at your service. We've gotten 100 of your coworkers back to normal. That's exactly what she said, coworkers, as if vagrancy wasn't a state of mind, but a profession, or a disease that can be cured. Leo was indignant, but he decided not to show that he was boiling inside. Maybe this woman would really give him some good advice. I have a simple question, but you must understand, said the tramp. Let's say I can't get over a girl. She comes to me everywhere. This is the third time I've seen her. And others, Yes, the psychologist nodded. What was her name? I don't know, Leo lied. How long did you two know each other? I don't know. Does that bother you? What's the problem that I can help you with? Leo was silent, but not because he had nothing to say, he was just afraid. Yes, he didn't know if Kendi really existed, though he didn't want to say her name. The problem was something else. He didn't realize if he really existed. Are the other beggars calling him Prince because he went to an expensive college and was once a financier? Or were they just mocking him? Did his past really exist? Or did he make it up, like a writer composing an adventure story? All these thoughts must have come from the lack of booze. It was the third day he'd been sober. If he made it all up, if Leonardo never existed and was only a beggar Leo, then his girlfriend did not exist. From these thoughts became quite bad. The beggar thanked the psychologist and smiled, but the woman only wrinkled her nose. He must look terrible. There was only one way left to confirm his own realism. Leo went to the other side of town. He stood in a giant line at a barber shop for beggars like himself. Two specialists in medical masks were cutting and shaving a huge crowd of people. The odors of the place could make an inexperienced person faint. When the procedure was over, Leo went to the mirror and took out a photograph. He always kept it close to his heart, as a reminder of the old days. It showed a young man in an expensive suit and yellow tie, smiling at 32. The smile wasn't real. I picked up the photo to compare it to myself. Eyes, nose, chin, and forehead all matched. It's really him. So in the past, Leo really was a financier and the son of a bankrupt millionaire. My legs started to ache from the long walk and standing. Urgent rest. The beggar began to rummage through his pockets to find a coupon for a night's lodging. Lost it. He took off his backpack, old and greasy, began to inspect all the compartments. Then the ridiculous coat he wore in almost all weathers. Jeans. The damn coupon was nowhere to be found, and he was counting on a bed, a disposable toothbrush, and a sandwich. Finally, the coupon turned up crumpled at the very bottom of his jeans pocket. Leo exhaled with relief. On the way to the lodge, Leo pondered. Everything that had happened to him was not a fantasy or a play of imagination. It gave him hope. On the other hand, he had killed that girl. He killed her, but he'd gotten away with it. It made my soul ache again. It's nice to know that you're healthy, that you're not crazy, and bitter to realize you're a murderer. 6 o'clock at night. The bed and breakfast is just about to open, and the best place is available. Leo chose a bunk at the very end of the room, on the first tier, put his things on it. This time the Castellan gave out a toothbrush and a sandwich in a clear bag. The beggar looked at it. No foreign papers. So that other co-workers wouldn't encroach on his place, he left the backpack behind. Anyway, there was nothing there that could be of interest to the inhabitants of the lodging house, and they usually steal at night. For a few cents in the basement, he could wash his clothes, and Leo decided to take advantage of the opportunity. Then he washed and cleaned himself up. After the barbershop, he looked almost like a normal person. That night, after a third day without alcohol, he slept surprisingly well. As always, he dreamed about bits and pieces of his past life. His parents' luxurious house, college, going out to restaurants. He felt great in the morning and thought he could really get back to normal. Look for a job, a temporary place to live. Leo opened his backpack to put a brush and a baggie in there. Disposable or not, you decide for yourself. This one could really be used more than once. My hand came across something that shouldn't be in the backpack. Leo took out an envelope, opened it, and got cold. Mark wanted to push the gas pedal to the floor, but held back. You have to be careful. 10 years to pass one day or even a month will not solve anything in his investigation. That's why he had to keep a cool head. Now he would go to the station, scrutinize the suitcase in front of Cindy, of course. He's already got her on the phone, and then he'll decide what to do. He had a secret too. Many years ago, he found the very major Cindy was sure existed. His name was Leonard Farber, a small-time crook, son of a victim of financial fraud. Mention of him lived only in the operational file, to which only he and the operatives had access. And the inspectors, but they rarely held such papers in their hands. True, no charges had been brought against him 10 years ago. Yeah, he and Candy were seen together. She was selling flowers at some rich guy's bar, so they could have met there. Theoretically, Leonard could have killed her, but why would he? In that dramatic year, he lost his father, his fortune, then tried to make money, but in the end he lost even more money and even went to prison. They even put an experienced agent in his cell, but Leonard kept quiet. He was angry at the whole world, but not because of the girl's death, but because of his own bankruptcy. Then the tiny time limit came to an end, and traces of the major were lost. When Cindy showed him the tramp's picture, Mark had mixed feelings. He was both amused and sad at the same time. She had found the major after all these years. But Paul had already told her about it, in great secrecy, because a private investigator should not share the results of his research with anyone. Leo was apparently down and out, so he disappeared from the investigator's radar. But the photograph of the car in which he could give his victim a ride changed everything, as well as the suitcase, which inexplicably why kept the courteous butler of the exemplary billionaire. "It can't be," cried Cindy, going through the clothes and shoes. "These are all hers. I gave this shirt to her myself." It was clear that Candy was not living on a budget, the bare minimum, and they were all cheap. 2 pairs of jeans, 1 dress, tights, some underwear, and a toothbrush. Even the suitcase was penniless. It didn't have a proper lock. If they had found the car and the things in it 10 years ago, it would have been possible to conduct expert examinations. But now, years later, no traces could have been preserved. "Let's sign the inspection report. Here and here. I'll keep investigating," Mark promised, but Cindy didn't want to leave. Mark specialized in cold cases. His department had a more poetic and sinister name for cases that coffins didn't want to investigate. That's right. Such cases can bury any career, even the most dedicated and careful investigator. In the early days of his career, nothing was going to go wrong, and he saw the county job as just a small stepping stone to a future career. "His name is Leonard Farber," Mark sighed. "A unique man who went from rich boy to pauper." "You mean you knew who he was?" Cindy was indignant. "And you kept quiet?" "Understand, there's a mystery to the investigation," said Mark. "I'm more surprised how you found him on the street in the first place." "I don't think he's changed at all," Cindy shrugged. "Candy told me about him." "You have to realize there's no direct evidence," the investigator said, "although he won't be able to hire an expensive lawyer anymore. If we press charges, anyone will be willing to work with him. Because such evidence is a sure acquittal, we need concrete evidence. Witness, but we canvass the entire side. No one saw this guy there, or his confession. But if he's been silent for so many years, why should he talk? Cindy smiled. He must have been the only one with secrets. She was certainly a prominent girl, and her sister, judging by the pictures, was a beauty. Mark always felt remorse when he had to investigate the deaths of young girls, as if he was responsible for what happened. "Do something for me," she asked and lowered her eyes. "Something special." Mark blushed. In his years with Cindy, he should have known she liked him as a man, but this was completely unacceptable to him. After all, he had a wife at home, even if they hadn't been getting along lately, and the children. But just as the investigator opened his mouth to express outrage, Cindy continued, "Go there, to that cliff. That little boy will tell you all about it. Only you, 'cause you know the whole story." "Wait a minute," Mark said. He already knew what she was getting at, but he decided to look surprised. Only in the movies do criminals return to the scene of the crime. How are we going to get him there? On what grounds? She told him her plan, and Mark grinned. That's a good one. For some reason, amateurs think they can investigate cases as they please. It must be time to file this case away for good. Let Cindy complain. "Do it for me," the girl asked. "It's been 10 years since I've had a real life." "All right," the investigator said in surprise. "I'm in." For such tricks, Paul could well be disbarred, and then the only way out was to become a bouncer in some club. He avoided that fate as best he could. At first glance, being a security guard seems easy. In reality, you have to stand around all night long, and if you're not in good health, it's not easy. And a bouncer can always get punched in the face by angry customers, so you have to keep in shape. No, that's not what Paul will do. He's going to do the bidding of a strange client who's been watching too many soap operas. 2 days ago, he'd already put $10 in that tramp's hand while he was passed out in the crosswalk. It was his own fault. He shouldn't have hit on a man who was just going to get coffee. But that time Paul was like bringing a stranger to his senses. It was acceptable. Today, the task was more difficult. Slip him that envelope without him noticing. The private detective nodded to Chris and went into the big room. He had dressed in old clothes, especially for following the vagrant. Basically, he could pass for one of these unfortunates. Pretending to choose a more comfortable bunk, Paul began to look for Leonard with his eyes. He wasn't there. His backpack was on one of the beds. Definitely his. There was a small emblem of the Red Cross on the front. They must have given him the item as humanitarian aid. He walked over to the backpack and looked around. No one. He took out an envelope, opened the zipper. "Hey, you!" Someone called out to him. Paul didn't turn around. "Yes, you. I'm talking to you." The detective heard footsteps approaching him. One of the lodgers, destitute, dirty, angry. He looked at Paul with distrust. "What are you doing here?" "Same as you," the private detective muttered. "Weren't you trying to cut off my purse?" The guest asked. "I can see you poking around." "Why is it yours?" Paul asked. "No." "That's good," said the detective, "because I lost one just like it the other day, with the same cross on it." "No, man, it's not yours," the lodger said and smiled. "It's Prince's purse. He's had it for a year, no less." "All right," Paul grumbled, "but I'll have a word with him. He's a bit of a tattletale. Hey, where's your stuff? You want to trade?" The detective nodded vaguely toward the hallway. This talkative drifter was starting to get on his nerves. Did he think he was going to spend the night? "Well, cheers," Paul said. "I'm going for a smoke." The beggar gave him a surprised look. He had cigarettes, and he didn't even offer them. This one must be a new one. He still looks quite decent. There are only a couple of holes in his t-shirt, and his sneakers are intact. Maybe his wife kicked him out of the house. The next day, Leo saw her again from a distance. She was looking at the clothes behind the window with the most interested look. It was her, and she looked like she was continuing to age with him, though she shouldn't have. But the vagabond wasn't as surprised now as he had been the day before. Coincidences like that just don't happen. There was an envelope in his backpack, and inside it was $20 and a one-way ticket. Lakeside. From that day on, Leo never visited that place again. At first, he was just afraid to go there, and then apparently he didn't have enough money. Today, however, he woke up with hope. Since he hadn't seen a body, maybe Candy wasn't dead. Maybe she lost her memory or had no claim on him. Leo stepped out of the lodge and approached the window behind which the mirror stood. After 3 days without alcohol, a haircut from the social barber, and laundry at the lodge, he looked almost normal. They definitely let him on the bus like this, which meant a trip to Lakeside. Why not? If she survived, that explained everything. That's the reason he's seen her the last couple days. But Leo didn't dare approach her. It wasn't far to the train station, and on the way he visited the canteen to get a proper meal. It wasn't a long journey, and he had $20, a fortune at his present time. He wanted to drink coffee again, once any morning started with this invigorating beverage. After breakfast, Leo found his bus, handed the driver his ticket, and took a seat. Over the past few years, he had grown accustomed to rudeness and was worried about whether he would be allowed on the bus. But after a haircut and a wash, the tramp didn't look as bad as usual. The driver didn't say a word, just took the ticket and tore it up. "You can choose a seat." Leo sat down by the window and put his backpack next to him so that no one would keep him company. In his years of loneliness, he had completely forgotten how to talk to people. Only his work phrases about how hungry he was, how tired and cold he was, and that he needed a few coins. Beggars don't have friends on the street. There are, of course, exceptions to the rules, but the alleged mutual aid of the homeless is simply a myth. It was a long ride, and Leo dozed off. He had already forgotten that blissful feeling of sleeping on a bus while traveling. Very few people went inside with him. Lakeside was usually visited in the afternoon or evening. The place had long ago become a must-see on tourist itineraries. As crazy as the plan was, it worked. The guy got on the bus. What's more, he went straight to the train station. Paul couldn't understand the man's logic. And then there was Mark's indecision. Maybe if they had questioned him properly years ago, he would have confessed to everything. "Hello, Mark." He sat down. The detective dialed a number from his notebook. "Excuse me?" There was a woman's voice on the other end. Paul hung up. "Oh shit. Good thing I called from a payphone. I've got to get the investigator and the client mixed up. It'll be a scandal if the truth comes out. Okay? Don't panic. We need to stick to the plan." "Mark, are you there?" The detective dialed another number. "Yes," the investigator answered. "He's on his way," Paul said. "I don't know if he's gonna make it. He just got on a bus." Silence. With these phone booths, you never know when you're going to lose the connection. The detective bangs the phone against the wall a few times. Maybe it helped, because he heard the familiar voice again. "I'm here," Mark answered. "I don't like this whole thing." "Wait," Paul continued. "I accidentally dialed this one. What's her name?" "Cynthia. And I called your name, Mark." "Cindy?" The investigator was surprised. "Did you talk to her?" "No, but she might have recognized my voice." "Deny everything," Mark replied. "You realize we both could get hurt." Paul walked toward the office. The case with this tramp was probably solved. Let the lady settle up with his assistant. He's not going to talk to her anymore. I can't believe he's doing this kind of nonsense. I wonder why it worked. And he'll go back to his unfaithful husbands and wives, kittens and dogs. Less pay, but no risks. Leo dreamed about the trial. He'd already been through that shame a few years before. All the newspapers had trumpeted that the son of a famous financier had followed in his father's footsteps. But he did it so ridiculously that he made the honorable public laugh, not with annoyance. He ran up debts, but he didn't even pretend to be in business. Just lost everything in the amusement arcades to end up in the dock. Leo memorized by heart the most caustic article about himself and his father. Risk-taking and fraud are twin brothers. Leonard seemed like a great guy. Friends, girls, expensive suits. No one could even imagine that this good-looking guy, whose first startup went bust, wouldn't even look for cryptic wording. He was simply borrowing money against a profitable business, promising 20% annual interest. On the scale of the world economy, the amount Leo took possession of was not so large. And not all of his creditors went to the police, who wants to look like a fool. If it were not for the sound name of Leonard, this case would have drowned in the hundreds of other similar cases and passed unnoticed. He didn't even have money for a lawyer, so the court appointed some old guy. He didn't understand anything about the stock market or investments, so he slept through the whole process. Only once in a while he woke up and inserted some remark, not always in the right place. Leo was lucky. Thanks to his full confession of guilt, the judge showed unprecedented humanity and imposed a symbolic punishment. The tramp woke up, glad that it was only a dream, that he didn't have to go through the shame once again. Yes, if he was tried for the murder of a pregnant woman, He could hardly expect mercy. He'd probably spend the rest of his days behind bars. There was nothing wrong with prison, by and large. There was certainly more order there than on the street. But Leo decided to himself that he would never go back behind bars again. And in his years of wandering, he had never once been to a police station, although he could get arrested for vagrancy. The secret is simple. Never stay in one place for too long. Keep moving. After 3 hours on the road, the bus finally arrived at the terminus. It was almost lunchtime. It was as if Leo had gotten a second wind. After so many years outdoors, his arms and legs usually ached. His knees and spine were aching. But today, he felt surprisingly good. So he decided to climb to the top point on the very cliff where his fall to the bottom began. The place has changed and become more cultured over the years. A secure fence has been installed along the entire hiking trail. It must have something to do with Candy and her untimely passing. Down at the bottom of the hill, there were souvenir shops and a few cafes. Leo wanted to finish his business as soon as possible, but he was in no hurry. He went into a cafe, ordered a coffee and a hot dog. He drank the drink with pleasure. It was amazing how people's attitudes toward him changed when he cleaned up a bit. No one kicked him out or threatened to call the police, and the sales girl even smiled. Once upon a time, when he wore expensive suits and ties, he would have definitely taken advantage of that smile, but not today. There were only a few cars parked in the huge parking lot. There must not be much of a crowd here on a weekday. The weather is beautiful, just like it was then, years ago. The fence made it easier to walk, and Leo was quickly at the very top. He walked to the edge. "Hello," he heard a voice and turned around sharply. The tramp almost slipped from surprise, but grabbed the fence with his hand. "I apologize for scaring him." In front of him stood a man dressed like a typical detective. Hat, gray coat, white shirt, though it was a fairly warm day. Shoes instead of comfortable sneakers. I wonder how he climbed that mountain in them. Even if he didn't utter a word, his affiliation with the police would be immediately clear. "Good afternoon," Leo replied. "To what do I owe the honor?" "My name is Mark. I'm investigating a case," the man replied. "It seems you're the one I've been waiting for the last few years. Would you like to tell me something?" "Yes," Leo sighed. "I do." And it was pure truth. It must be that if he had met the detective even a year earlier, he would have denied everything, but that didn't make any sense today. Leo was just tired of moving from place to place, and also from the eyes he saw in front of him, but realizing all of that was only possible here. I'm sorry," the drifter shrugged. "I'm sorry, but I can't help it." Ever since her sister's death, it was as if Cindy had lost the best part of herself. She didn't believe in suicide for a second. And when the pathologist told her about the pregnancy, Cindy was ready to tear down walls. Of course, he was the golden boy who threw her off the cliff. And even back then, years ago, she realized why. Cindy felt sorry for herself for not demanding that her sister stop hanging out with the major. She felt that this guy would bring her no joy. But the police didn't seem to agree with her reasoning. Such a complicated case was entrusted to the dumbest investigator on the coast. He never found the red car that the major used to drive Candy to the vacant lot. Didn't even find him, though there weren't many children of rich parents in the neighborhood. He dropped the case a dozen times and started over after she complained to the top. At some point, she just accepted that it would be Mark who would investigate the case and decided to cooperate with him. She turned to private detectives, fortune tellers, approached expensive restaurants and cafes where this major could be. Only after 4 years, she finally learned his name and was able to get a photo. Turns out, he stopped being a major right after her sister was murdered. If that's a punishment, it's a very weak one. Cindy tried to get her life back on track. She graduated college, became a designer, got married, even had a baby. But she still had an emptiness inside her, a hole in the place of the part of her soul that had filled Candy's. And so she went back to the station again and again, talking to the investigator and trying to convince him that she was right. He never argued with her, willingly listened to her, and for the first time he snapped only recently. At the same time, she was looking for the major herself, but he seemed to have fallen through the ground. He'd been in jail for some financial thing, and then he disappeared. Mark, that tight investigator, convinced her there was no evidence anyway, and he didn't seem intent on bringing the case to trial. Until one day she accidentally found Leonard herself. There was a new beggar in the passageway she went down every day. Like a true artist, she was always looking at people. Maybe she'd see something in their profile, sketch them, and though she'd never seen Leo, the murderous major, in person, he'd given himself away. The way he looked at her, like he was seeing a ghost. Cindy had to hire a detective to follow the drifter, get his name, and take his picture. Cindy couldn't believe her eyes. Leo had sunk so low that he had definitely hit bottom. Only her eye of a seasoned artist could recognize in the beggar the golden boy who had driven Kendi around and probably sent her to the other side of the world. When Cindy hired a private investigator, he too made surprised eyes. But he knew his job, and within a couple days, he confirmed her hunch. The overweight retired man didn't know what she was interested in. But he didn't ask any questions. After all, she was paying money. He had somehow managed to slip the note and put the envelope with the money and the ticket in his backpack. For some reason, Cindy was sure Leonard wouldn't stand for it and drive to the lakeside. And there he'd meet a policeman and, out of surprise, tell him everything. All she had to do was be patient and wait, so that after all these years, justice would be served and retribution would find its villain. And if it hadn't been for that phone call today, she would have kept waiting. She could have sworn it was a private detective talking to her, and I think he gave her the name of an investigator. Did they really know each other? Or had Mark come out to him himself after her strange request? Mark had taken up position on the hill earlier in the morning. The bus ticket Cindy was talking about didn't have a departure time, only a date. So the drifter and part-time ex-major could arrive at any moment. Of course, the plan seemed fantastic to him. Not only did Leonard have to show up today, he'd have to want to open up to him, tell him everything that was on his mind. Even talking to Paul wasn't reassuring. Let's say Leonard got on the bus, but what's stopping him from getting off? He could change his mind by the time he got to Lakeside, or make surprised eyes when he asked a question, or even get angry and pick a fight. Well, that's unlikely. Beggars don't usually show aggression. Gathering for this strange task, the investigator for some reason did not think about the fact that he would have to wait for the tramp to appear in the blazing sun. His hat offered little protection, and his shirt was quickly soaked. "They never looked for me," Leonard replied. "No one asked questions. I wasn't hiding from anyone. I waited for them to come for me, even made up an alibi for myself. But you never came. And that waiting was eating me up inside. Well," the investigator smiled, "so I came. Better late than never." "Yes," nodded the tramp. Even after the confession, he was not relieved. Rather, he was filled with fear. Now the newspapers would be sure to go after him with renewed vigor. If they remembered, of course. Over the years, his name may well have been forgotten for the social media. Although, if we're talking about solving a murder from 10 years ago, the case is solved, Mark said. I think the court will take your remorse into account. Come on, son. What's next? Leo asked. He didn't move, but clung to the fence as if he were dizzy. The usual, sighed the investigator and took out a cigarette. Precinct. Protocol. You'll have to write a confession so the court won't take it out on you. I'll put in a good word with the prosecutor so he'll be loyal. And then? The beggar asked. I don't know, admitted the investigator. Prison, I guess. Hunger came back again. Mark thought it would be a good idea to go to a cafe and get something to eat. After all, this hobo-turned-major was almost like a relative to him. He knew almost everything about him. Prison? Wrong, Leo said, swam over the fence and took a step forward off the cliff, and flew into the void.